Hello, everybody. Welcome to the March meeting of the Utilities Advisory Commission. This is our first time in the hybrid virtual plus in-person format. And so hopefully it will go smoothly, but if we have a couple hitches, please bear with us. We'll go ahead and get started with roll call. And as usual, I will call out the names in the order in which they've appeared, starting with Commissioner Johnston.
Present.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Vice Chair Siegel.
Present.
Commissioner Metz.
Present.
And I am here as well. And unfortunately, Commissioners Bowie and Scharf are not able to join us tonight. So let's see. We have a quorum with the 5 of us. As far as agenda review and revisions, I don't believe that we have any. We have a fairly packed agenda tonight. It's definitely budget season. So why don't we go straight to oral communications. If there are any members of the public wishing to address the commission on any subject not on the agenda, whether virtually or here in person. I don't know, actually.
I can ask the question. Actually, I do want to note that Mr. Bowie is on the participant list. So he is attending. I'm trying to
My
promote him.
understanding is that he's able to listen, but not able to participate and won't be able to vote tonight. So it doesn't count for quorum.
And Mr. Bowie does have his hand raised.
Oh, okay. Maybe he can clarify.
Yes. Good evening, members of the commission. Yes, it's John Bowie, part of the UAC commission. However, tonight I'm taking care of a sick 8-month-old, and that kind of consequence doesn't really allow me to be on the dais. So I will be listening in as a member of the public to make sure that I am up to speed with the discussion and everything. And as it is rate season, an important time for us to all be caught up. So thanks to the commissioners that are able to attend, and I feel fortunate that you are able to reach quorum tonight, and I look forward to the next meetings.
Thanks, Commissioner Bowie.
Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak on an item not on tonight's agenda? If so, please raise your hand. No hands are raised.
Thank you. And can I just clarify so I don't have to do it 6 times over as we go through the agenda? If there was somebody here in person who wanted to speak, how do they identify themselves? Like we used to have comment cards. Would they, that was still, okay. So I'll get a comment card if there's somebody from here. Very good. Okay, let's see then, let's move to approval of the minutes. And I want to take them separately. So let's first talk about the minutes of the February 2nd meeting. Are there any proposed revisions? Vice Chair Siegel.
Hi, thank you. Just a couple. One, I don't believe it was a special meeting and it's titled as a special meeting. I think it was a
Yeah, that was our regular meeting. That's right.
right. And then there are a couple of little typos, but the only one that
Hold on. Tabitha's shaking her head. Can you clarify?
A special meeting is any time or date or location that is different than what is stated on the website. The city, the UAC meets the first Wednesday of every month in the chambers at 7 p.m. So anytime we meet outside of the chambers, outside of 7 p.m. or outside of the first Wednesday of the month, it's considered a special meeting.
Thank you for clarifying. Okay, so it was
Great.
special because it was virtual and it was at 5 p.m. even though it was our regularly scheduled first Wednesday of the month. Okay, so I guess it was a special meeting.
okay, disregard that. Then the only other one I wanted to mention is on page 6 in the first full paragraph, sort of in the middle of the sentence. And if you look from the left, it says of the bridge solution to help defer, and it's supposed to be defer one-off transformer upgrades. Do you need more guidance in that? It's the first paragraph, full paragraph on that page. So-
Yeah, I found it.
Okay. That was it.
Are there any other proposed revisions? All right, do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve the minutes as revised.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, quick roll call. Commissioner Johnston,
Approved.
Commissioner Smith,
Approved.
Vice Chair Siegel,
Approved.
Commissioner Metz,
Approved.
and I approve as well. So then let's turn quickly to the minutes for the February 8th special meeting. Are there any proposed revisions? Vice Chair Siegel, your hand is up
Apologies.
last time. All right, I do have one proposed revision on page 3 of those minutes, packet page 17, but page 3 of the minutes. Towards the bottom, in the paragraph around for sale, appreciated, et cetera. I'd like to, I guess, it's not a single word, it's the sense of the sense of my commentary was that the goal is to have a single data set with geographic service provider cost and speed data to be gathered from both the market survey and the fiber hub. And it ends up sounding like the fiber hub asks what current service is, whereas I think it gets the approximate neighborhood. So the idea was for the market survey and the fiber hub to gather the same information so that that could be consolidated. So I hope there's a way to capture that. Sentiment from me. And with that, are there any additional comments on the draft minutes? Could we have a motion?
I'll move to approve the minutes as revised.
Second.
Thank you. All right, Commissioner Johnston,
Approve.
Commissioner Smith,
Approved.
Vice Chair Siegel,
Approved.
Commissioner Metz,
Approved.
and I approve as well. Okay, I do not believe we have any unfinished business from last month, so that brings us to the Utilities Director report. Director Batchelor?
Thank you, Chair Fasel. Good evening, Commissioners. Councilmember Cormack. A couple of updates real quick. So hydro production forecast, we are still seeing below average rainfall. Last year during this period of time in 2021, we were about 38% below the term average. And we're forecasting that this hydro year for 2022 is going to be about 41% below those conditions. So we're going to continue to see these conditions moving forward. If you remember, I believe it was in last month's meeting, we had asked the commission to look at approving and moving forward the rate adjuster, the hydro rate adjuster. That will be going to council on March the 14th. So that is moving forward. We also took it to the Finance Committee. I guess that was actually in January when we brought it to the UAC. We brought it to the Finance Committee. They agreed that I'm moving it forward. So it will be heard on March 14th to the meeting. A little bit around our water supply. You know, we had those atmospheric rivers in October and December and generate significant snowpack for January. But it's been one of the driest Januaries on record, and the Hetch-Hetchy gauge, and it continues through February. That snowpack total participation is well below the normal regional water system. However, it's in pretty good shape as of 27 of February. The storage is about 74% And normally around this period of time, it's right around 82%. So SFPUC still declared local water shortage emergencies in November that we're still moving to. We're asking still for voluntary statewide 10% reductions. In January of this year, Palo Alto usage was almost identical to the water budget, but usage will exceed the budget and probably starting at the end of February. We're gonna have to re-look at those numbers, but we think that there might be a little bit of a shortfall. So we're planning on still doing outreach, encouraging residents and businesses to save water while still caring for urban canopy and reminding of the current water restrictions. Natural gas prices we saw during the wintertime, still being high during that period of time. And we've had a lot of customers call in to the call center asking about their gas rates being and pricing very high during this period of time. We buy on the market. Market rates have been continually going up. It's done from, usually it has effects for the weather, gas production, and shortage levels internationally. So we'll still purchase on the market and monthly, therefore fluctuation in those prices will continue as we see. We do have our website up, cityofpaloalto.org/efficiencies tips, providing some no cost and low cost ways to keep those utility bills down. Some upcoming events starting on March the 10th from 7 to 8. We have a workshop that's going to look at finance of incentives clinic, where many financial assistance programs will be available for income qualified residents, including clean cars for a grant, drive clean assist grants, county specific programs in San Francisco Bay Area. Attendees may require free consultations and additional guidance to identify programs which they may qualify for. We also have Neighborhood Expo EVs coming, talk to EV owners and drivers about their experiences as they're driving their vehicles, ask questions and get answers to these topics. This is going to be also on the calendar, and it's through acturia.org/2022 EVs. And they're going to be the host of that seminar. And the last thing is that on Saturday, March the 26th from 10 to 11, it's an online event. It's an EV right for you. You'll be able to review models, charges, and homes on the road, incentives, total costs, ownerships, and hear EV owners about what they love about their EV vehicles. And with that, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Director
Questions?
Batchelor.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Commissioner Johnson, he has his hands raised.
Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Johnston.
Just a question for Director Batchelor. I saw a lot of articles on Nextdoor complaining about the utility bills. Is that just due to the kind of higher than expected gas prices?
That is correct, Commissioner Johnson. So as we've seen and as we've been inundated by calls from our customers, most of those calls are coming in from our gas rates and the increasing that has been going on over the winter time.
I just wonder if we see that kind of a situation coming up, whether there's a way of getting the word out kind of proactively so that customers expect to see it. They're not surprised by the bill, that they've had some warning.
We can probably do some proactive approaches on that. We can probably, I would think that, we have email accounts to customers. We can also do maybe some bill inserts ahead of time, letting them know that, wintertime is coming. We can push them towards the website, asking them to look at the website, to look at some tips. But yes, we can look at being a little bit more proactive on that.
Great, thank you.
All right, thanks, Director Batchelor. If there's no additional Questions or comments? Let's move forward to our new business. The first item of which is the resolution authorizing the use of teleconferencing for UAC meetings. And now, by now familiar action item for us on the agenda, which enables us, even in times of hybrid, to be able to be teleconferencing in for both commissioners and the public. Do we have any members of the public wishing to speak on this item?
If anyone attending remotely would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand. No hands are raised.
All right. Any commissioner commentary or discussion? All right. Shall we try to go straight to a motion?
I move approval of the resolution.
I heard Commissioner Johnston make the motion. Commissioner Smith, do you want a second?
I'd be happy to. I'll second.
Thank you. All right, Commissioner Johnston,
Approve.
Commissioner Smith,
Approve.
Vice Chair Siegel,
Approve.
Commissioner Metz,
Approved.
and I approve as well. So we will be able to keep doing this. All right, let's move on then to the discussion and update on Palo Alto fiber community engagement. Why don't we
Okay,
start?
Sorry. If anyone from the public would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand, virtually or in person. Okay, none. I don't see any hands.
All right, thank you. Is there a staff presentation?
Yes, there will be. So good evening, Commissioners and Councilmember Cormack. On February 24th, the city hosted the Palo Alto Fiber Community Information Session, where we shared information about the fiber project and answered community questions. About 80 people attended this session, which is considered a pretty good turnout. Also, based on the Q&A segment, there is definitely community interest and support for our city-provided broadband. We'd like to thank everyone who attended and for the participation. And for those who weren't able to attend, you can replay the video recording at City of Palo Alto YouTube. Tonight, we have John Honker from Magellan to speak about the upcoming residential and commercial broadband surveys, which we launched in May. And also, just to give you a heads up, in the April UAC meeting, we will be providing more community engagement updates and sharing preliminary financial business plans for fiber to the home and fiber to the premise. We look forward to the UAC's feedback at that time. And Tabitha just reminded me I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Dave Yen, Utility Strategic Business Manager. And now let me turn it over to John. John, are you able to speak? John, we're not able to hear you. Tabitha, are you able to hear anyone?
No, I'm not. I'm trying to see if I can help him, but I don't have any, there's nothing wrong on our end with him.
Okay.
I wonder if it would make sense to move to the next agenda item while we troubleshoot Mr. Honker's connection. Is that something we could do?
Yes, that is what
Yeah, we can
we'll
do-
go
we
ahead
can
and
come back.
we'll go ahead and do that.
Okay, why don't we move ahead to item 4, the discussion and update on the rec exchange program results, and then we'll come back to the update on the Palo Alto Fiber community engagement. So let's see, as always, we'll start with finding out if there's any members of the public wishing to speak. on the Rec Exchange program results?
If anyone would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand. No hands are raised.
All right then. I see Mr. Stack on the screen. Go ahead. I don't know if somebody wants to introduce you, if you introduce yourself, but take it away, staff.
Sure. Good evening, commissioners. This is Jim Stack, Senior Resource Planner in Resource Management Division. Let me share my screen real quick. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this will be a quick update for everybody on the Rec Exchange program. I'll be sharing our actual results for the program in 2021 and projections for 2022 and beyond. Just real quick as background, most of you are probably familiar, but the Rec Exchange program was approved in the summer of 2020 by council. And essentially it gives us authorization to sell a portion of our in-state renewable resources, which are relatively high in value under the state's RPS regulations, and purchase some less expensive out-of-state resources in exchange for those. And our objective, our marching orders were to sort of maximize the amount of value we could get through this swap of in-state for out-of-state resources in order to have some revenue to reduce rates and to fund local decarbonization efforts. So we've done this 2 years already. So this will be the second year of results that I'll be presenting here. So for 2021, our actual bucket one rec, those are the in-state renewables, our sales volumes and our revenue totals were roughly in line with the projections we shared with you last spring, back in May. They're slightly higher actually. But you can see that the net revenue that we earned over the course of the year was significantly lower than projected, just over 2 million compared to 2.8 million. And the reason for the discrepancy is that over the course of last year, our hydro situation just deteriorated throughout the year. It stayed dry, and we got much less hydro generation than we expected. So we had to purchase a lot more bucket 3 recs to cover up for those the shortfall in hydro output. Not great results, but still $2 million of net revenue from this program, which is pretty considerable. And just as a reminder, when council approved the program, they directed that for the first 2 years of the program, so calendar years 2020 and 2021, we would devote 2/3 of the net revenue from the program to rate relief for customers, so just reducing our supply costs. And the remaining 1/3 would go towards local decarbonization efforts. And then for calendar year 2022 and going forward, they directed that all of the revenue would be going towards local decarbonization programs. So this next slide is a stacked bar chart showing what our overall supply portfolio looked like for the year before the Rec Exchange transactions on the left, and then after the Rec Exchange transactions. So you can see both of these stacked bars have a little bit of a hashed area at the top of them, which represents unspecified power, which is market power purchases combined with unbundled recs. So what this indicates is that last year, because it was so dry, even in the absence of the Rec Exchange program, we would have had to purchase some market power and some unbundled recs just to achieve just to comply with our carbon neutral plan objectives. And of course, once we sold, a good chunk of our in-state renewables, we had to purchase a lot more. So this is basically the same information, but shown in pie chart form. So left is before the transactions and right is after them. And you can see the wedge, the hashed wedge area increases significantly. This also shows our overall RPS level dropping from 67% before the transactions to 32% after them, because under the RPS regulations, we can't count the majority of our unbundled rec purchases towards RPS compliance. This also shows the average emissions intensity associated with the portfolio using the CEC's, the California Energy Commission emissions intensity methodology. And unfortunately, they don't recognize bucket 3 RECs as having zero carbon. They assign them the same carbon content that a generic market power purchase would have, which is essentially dirty power. So our emissions intensity increased from 26 kilograms of CO2 per megawatt hour to 155 kilograms of CO2 per megawatt hour. Although, as a point of reference, the statewide average emissions intensity for 2020 was actually 466. So that's still, we had a emissions intensity of one third that level, even if you count the bucket 3 RECs as having a pretty high carbon value associated with them. And this last one is the same basic information, but shown in table form. This is how the power content label looks to customers. This is what we send out to customers around September every year. Our customers this year will only see the column on the right, which incorporates the REC transactions. But I'm showing the column on the left too for comparison purposes, what the portfolio would have looked like without doing these REC exchange transactions. So again, here you can see that the renewable content drops from 67 to 32, and the unspecified sources increased significantly, and the emissions intensity as well. So any questions so far on the 2021 results before I move to our projections?
Commissioners, go ahead and put your either virtual or real hand up if you have any questions. I actually have a couple. Mr. Stack, if that's okay. Is it Dr. Stack?
Either way, it's fine.
Let's see. So I'm curious why the base portfolio is 26 kilograms if the base portfolio was intended to be carbon neutral, even with, before we embarked on the REC exchange.
Yeah, good question. So it's 26 for 2021 because, as you can see, we were a little bit short overall. So we had to purchase, we would have been 4% short because of the poor hydro situation. So we would have had to purchase some unbundled RECs, even without these REC exchange transactions, and they have a carbon content associated with them. Also, our landfill gas resources, which are shown in the second row as biomass, those have a very small carbon content attributed to them as well, even though we consider them to be renewable and carbon neutral when you look at the life cycle of the resources. But the landfill gas and the unbundled RECs that we would have purchased even without the transactions result in that number 26.
Gotcha. Thanks for clarifying. I have a couple more questions, but I think they're better saved for the end.
Okay. So now I'll jump into the projections for the current year. So for 2022, we've actually just this week released an RFP where we're trying to sell a good chunk of our bucket 1 resources that we expect to be able to sell for the whole year, and purchase a good chunk of the bucket 3 resources RECs that we expect that we'll need for the year. Although we'll probably do another round of transactions later in the year once we know more accurately exactly how much we are able to sell and how much we have to buy. So these are all projected numbers here in this table. You can see that I guess the number to highlight would be the net revenue total, which we are projecting to be only about $770,000 this year, compared to a little over $2 million last year. There are a few reasons for the number being so much lower this year. I think the biggest one is probably the fact that we have fewer bucket 1 resources to sell this year because one of our larger wind energy contracts expired at the end of 2021. We have a new solar contract, the Rosamond Solar Project, that we have in place to replace that energy, but it actually doesn't start delivering to us until next year, 2023. So we have a kind of a 1-year dip in our bucket one resources that we have available to sell. Also, the price differential between the bucket one resources and bucket three resources, it continues to narrow just a little bit over time. So it's a little bit projected to be a little bit smaller this year than it was last year. And then the hydro situation, of course, is looking pretty poor for the year, which means we have a large amount of bucket three purchases that we expect to have to make. So this is the bar chart view of our 2022 projections, which looks pretty similar to the 2021 graph. Again, even without the REC exchange transactions, we're projecting that our portfolio will be a little bit short overall. So we would need to purchase bucket three RECs, even in the absence of this program, just to maintain our carbon neutral portfolio. This is the pie chart view of that same information. Again, it looks pretty similar to the 2021 version, although in this case, the wind energy wedge, the green one, is about half the size of the one in 2021 because of the expiration of that, the Shiloh wind contract last year. And also the RPS level is only 61% this year before the transactions, compared to, I think it was 67% last year. Again, that's due to the expiration of that wind energy contract. And then this number will jump up to about 71% next year when that the new Rosamond solar contract begins to deliver to us. The emissions intensities are fairly similar to the 2021 numbers, 34 kilograms of CO2 per megawatt hour before the transactions and 153 after. And again, that's about a third of the statewide average from 2020. And then this one, again, is the power content label view of that same information. This is what our customers will see. Any questions on the 2022 projections? Okay, I have one more slide showing longer term projection.
Dr. Stack, I think Commissioner Metz has a question.
Yeah,
Sure.
I had one question for all the out years, which is, do we have a target that we have to meet? I didn't see that in the presentation. I did look at the CPUC website, and it looked like our numbers are close to those targets. But do we have to meet those, or I'd just like you to address that as you go through it.
Sure. Yeah. Let me show you the projections we have for 2022 through 2027. It's kind of, and I can touch on that point that you just raised there. Longer term, the key information is kind of highlighted in the bottom two rows in the net revenue and the RPS level. You can see that the net revenue number jumps up after 2022 to almost 2 million again in 2023. And it does so because of the start of that new Rosamond solar contract, kind of replenishing our bucket one resource supply. Also, the fact that we are projecting that at some point, hopefully the drought will end, our hydro resources will kind of recover and start to generate the average level of hydro production. So you can see our bucket three purchase costs go down over time as we kind of project that our resources, our hydro recovers. But then longer term, beyond 2024, you can see that the net revenue number starts to decrease as you go out year by year. And the reason for that is largely because, as Commissioner Metz just mentioned, our RPS requirement level does start to tick up year by year. So this is showing the amount of bucket one resources we need in order to comply with the RPS requirements. This is a little bit different than the overall RPS need, which a portion of our RPS requirement can be met using bucket three resources, but predominantly they have to be met using bucket one resources. And this shows the the upward track that we have to maintain. So we have to keep more and more of our bucket one resources in our portfolio going forward, just to be in compliance with the RPS law. I hope that answered your question, Commissioner Metz. This is the last thing we have, so if you have any further follow-up questions, I'm happy to take those now.
Yeah, the main question was, I didn't see the targets in here, and I just wanted to be sure we're meeting those.
Yes, we absolutely are projecting to meet those, and we will definitely make sure we don't sell too many resources so that we do comply with those.
Commissioner Smith?
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment. When we passed this in the summer of 2020, we were literally 3 months into the COVID crisis. And at the time, we faced significant budget shortfalls and revenue shortfalls across the utilities. And it was discussed at the time that this was a very simple and obviously financially economic goods decision, but not necessarily a decision that would last, well out, for example, into 2027, as shown here on the chart. That at some point in the near future, we would have a discussion probably with the City of Palo Alto Utilities, as well as ourselves and obviously City Council, to discuss the possibility of ending this rec exchange program. So I just want to highlight that from my view and from my memory, I've always felt that this was a temporary measure to address budget shortfall and possible, if you will, rate stabilization measure, if you will. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. And to that point, when the City Council approved this resolution authorizing the program, they didn't actually establish a sunset date on our authorization. So our authorization sort of continues, but they did direct us to come back after the first, I think it's 2 or 3 years. I think we're probably due to come back sometime in the next calendar year to kind of review the authorization and determine whether it's warranted to continue on into the future.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. That was my memory as well, that it was going to come back just to be discussed again at about that time frame. Are there any other commissioners with questions or comments? I have just a couple. One was, so a portion of the funds from the rec exchange are set aside for local decarbonization programs. Do we know which programs are funded by the rec exchange? Do we track that? Have they been identified, or are the funds put in a reserve to support future efforts? How does that work?
On this one, I think I'll have to defer to somebody on the program services side, but I believe the revenues are set aside in a reserve. And I know we have some heat pump rebate programs that are currently going, so I'm not sure if it's all going to be devoted toward those programs or future efforts that are in development.
Jim, I could speak to that. Jonathan Abenshine, Assistant Director Utilities Resource Management, temporarily absent from that role. Still working heavily on the SCAP, and there's, as you know, some pretty heavy conversations about things like building electrification and setting priorities with the ad hoc sustainability subcommittee. So most of those funds are still being held in reserve. There are some discussions about releasing some funds in the FY 2023 budget, but the exact priorities for those funds are still under discussion. We do expect that it'll include programs related to single-family building electrification, multifamily building electrification, and small and medium business electrification to start with. and the funding should be adequate to expand those programs as we figure out exactly where we want to spend that money. I will say that there is likely the need for some specific council action around the use of those funds. So we're working through how to coordinate that. So it's mostly being held in reserve right now is the simple answer.
That makes complete sense. Thank you. Director Batchelor, did you want to say something? You looked up? No. Okay. And then I only have one other question, which Dr. Stack, you partially answered as we went along. I had underlined just at the very end of the report on page 2 that some of the city's older renewable energy contracts were expiring. And you explained that that was wind and that the Rosamont solar contract it's only going to start producing power, I guess, next year. Is that Rosamont the same facility that some of us went to, that kind of a virtual ribbon cutting?
Yeah, that facility actually began operating a couple of years ago, but our contract with them doesn't begin until next year. So that is operational, and a couple of CCAs in this area, in the Bay Area, are receiving power from it already. I
see. Okay, but Palo Alto just picked a future year in which to start receiving power. Yeah. Is there a reason those didn't line up, the end of the wind and the start of the solar?
I think that that's getting into some of the nitty gritty of our negotiations on the last PPA, which started actually with a different project and different company, and they sold the PPA to the Clearway group that does the Rosamond project, and it shifted over.
So it's complicated.
Yeah, it's complicated with from the construction perspective. So we were one of the first to start negotiating, but as Jim mentioned, that there was some buyout, and then we ended up getting pushed towards the second phase. So it didn't really line up when we were looking at this. So we were off by 1 year.
Got it. Okay, I was just curious. Are there any other commissioners? Councilmember Cormack?
I just want to say that I think Mr. Abendschein officially has the longest title I've ever heard.
So long, in fact, that it doesn't fit on the Zoom screen. I'm not quite sure what it is. Oh, Vice Chair Siegel.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to follow up whether we're considering any wind contracts in the future and whether there's any thought about wind versus solar having any benefit of using both, and I guess that's the question, if there's any benefit or if it's just cheaper to do solar and that's the benefit.
Yeah, that's a great question and a good segue to my next presentation I'll be giving to you in the next 2 or 3 months when we start our integrated resource plan discussion process. So just to kind of give you a preview of that, we are scheduled to do our 5-year update to our integrated resource plan. The first one we submitted to the CEC at the beginning of 2019. So the next one is coming up in a little less than 2 years. It's due. So this is kind of a lengthy review process where we do a long-term look at our entire portfolio, kind of look at all of our resources and our needs, and kind of determine how best to meet them. And in this cycle, we have kind of a major decision to make because we have the Western base resource hydro contract. It expires at the end of 2024, and we have the option to renew that, which we've already kind of approved. But we have the ability to reduce our share of that contract or even get out of it entirely. And that's a big chunk of our portfolio. So we have to make that decision in the next 2 years. So we do have we will be kind of doing some analysis of whether to, maintain our share of that contract or to switch over to, wind or solar, a combination of the two, solar and storage combined, or some other resource like a geothermal kind of baseload profile resource. So we're just starting to get the analytical gears going now to look into those questions. And so we'll be having quite a few discussions about that with you over the next year and a half as we go through that process.
I'm personally all kinds of excited for that. So
As are we.
looking forward to it. All right. I don't see any more hands up from commissioners. So then let me ask, are we ready to go back to topic number 3, the Palo Alto Fiber Community Engagement Update?
We
Did we
are,
solve our AV issues?
Chair.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Stack, very much. Great presentation. Thanks for the discussion.
Thank you.
And then
I'd like to introduce John Hunker from Magellan. John, I understand that you're still having video problems, but you can hear us.
Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Yeah, he had to upgrade his Zoom app today, right before this meeting, so he might be having some technical difficulties. So maybe we'll work offline with him and then we'll come back to him.
Yeah.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Oh, yes, we can.
yes.
Oh, there we go. I actually had to unmute my Zoom even though I'm on the phone. So I apologize for the AV snafus tonight, everyone.
Welcome. Go ahead and dive in.
Okay, well, good to speak to all the commissioners again. Thank you for the time tonight. We wanted to dive right in because I know we're running a little late due to technical difficulties. So tonight what we really wanted to talk about was just give you an update on where we are with the community engagement on the fiber expansion project, on the fiber to the home project, as well as an update on the surveys for businesses and residents, which will be coming out here in the coming months. One of the big events that happened with the community engagement last week was really the first full community meeting. And thanks to the Palo Alto team for organizing that, and Amanda and Megan from communications for coordinating and the logistics and getting content together. We feel that it was a very positive meeting, especially for the first one, as we start to build awareness of the fiber to the home project and Palo Alto Fiber with the community. So the meeting happened last Thursday, the 24th. There were 80 plus attendees on the call. We really saw the focus being heavily on people wanting to sign up for service. And we thought that was a very, important initial sort of acid test as we look at Palo Alto Fiber and we look at how the community is responding to, the engagement, because we're seeing good interest from the community. And, we do these a lot across the country, and sometimes they're very slow to materialize. And I think we've seen in Palo Alto the complete opposite. It's been very, very strong attendance, strong response to not only the meeting last week, but also the other engagement activities that have been happening, like the Palo Alto Fiber Hub, direct email, direct questions, as well as a lot of the Q&A that came out of last week's meeting. So that's been really positive. Last week's meeting the goal was really to focus on not so much the technology, because the technology doesn't really provide the benefits, right? The differentiators, we needed to list the differentiators and focus on the benefits of Palo Alto Fiber, being faster speeds, being better customer service, being faster uploads, local ownership, really everything that would potentially differentiate a Palo Alto Fiber network from a standard internet service provider, so standard provider that's out there today. We also emphasized heavily on the local ownership and control side, because that really does differentiate municipal utilities in the broadband world from traditional providers. So again, good attendance, lots of Q&A that came at the end. The communications team is working through that Q&A now to post up on that FAQ and the engagement portal. And we left the community really with how to stay in contact. So we collected emails, collected information, so that those folks can continue to get newsletters, stay engaged with the project as things are moving along. And most importantly, you know, let the community know that the surveys are coming, right? And participate in the surveys, because, you know, one thing that we saw during last week's meeting was lots of questions about pricing, about what services, when are they going to get here, and when is my community, my neighborhood going to get access to fiber. You know, pushing them toward that survey and saying, you know, you've got to move in that direction. You've got to be able to take that survey, because it's going to help determine, you know, when services are potentially available in your neighborhoods, as we look at, you know, where the greatest centers of demand are for fiber in Palo Alto. So all in all, great meeting. The next one will be scheduled. We're looking sort of in the May timeframe for the second meeting. And now I'd like to just spend a couple minutes talking through the surveys, which, you know, we're coming up to. One of the key you know, directions so far has been to make sure that there's enough engagement that happens ahead of the surveys. And we've really been able to push that engagement pretty hard along with your communications team, so that the awareness is there. So we're not hitting residents and businesses cold once these surveys come out. So that was another reason to push the surveys out a little bit further into the second quarter, just to ensure that the community was aware they were coming, and also make sure that they were understanding what fiber is and why they should be responding to a survey about fiber and Palo Alto fiber. A little bit about the surveys themselves. So the way these will work will be a direct email that goes to a resident or a business email box or inbox with an individual link for the survey, so we know exactly where they come from, and the resident has a unique link and unique tracking link for that survey. We will have separate surveys for residents and businesses. And, you know, one of the key goals is really to understand the value that consumers place on broadband, and more importantly, fiber. To understand also the value of the city potentially providing services versus other providers. So we ask questions about, well, if all other factors were equal, who would you want to be your internet service provider? The city versus other providers. And it helps us develop and helps you understand how much brand equity, how much value and reputation the citizens and businesses have in the city. We also look at things like current competition, as well as we run what we call a choice-based conjoint analysis, which really gives a scientific way to estimate take rates, pricing, and speeds for broadband services on Palo Alto fiber. We did preview the surveys with the UAC subcommittee last week. We got some great comments back and have thus incorporated those into the most recent versions of the survey, which are just being finalized now and are running through testing. So again, we talked about this a bit. We scheduled the launch of the surveys in early May. Goal is to move those forward to accommodate more engagement times. As we go through the survey period, right after the launch, you're typically going to have about a 4-week period that's needed to generate the results. So if we launch in early May, then we'll be looking at early June at the latest to have, you know, enough results come in from the community to get statistically the valid samples. And in Palo Alto, we're going to be looking for about 350 residential surveys and about 200 business surveys to get really, really solid results. And we don't anticipate any issues doing that. We think the surveys are going to be have a very high response rate. We'll do reminders and ticklers, we call them, that go out to residents weekly. So once they receive the survey, if they haven't taken it, it's still in their inbox. We'll send them a reminder. Or if they have partially completed it, sometimes they do. Sometimes they'll partially complete it and they'll walk away to go do something else. We'll also send a reminder if they haven't completed that within 24 hours, just to log back in and complete it. After the 4-week period's over, we'll leave the surveys open because it will allow us just to drive more engagement, right? We want to continue to gain more information from the community from the survey. So there's no reason to necessarily close it down. We can leave it open for a longer time and continue to collect that data. We also expect after the initial 4-week period that we'd be looking at about 3 weeks to run through the analysis and establish those final take rates and the things like pricing, information on satisfaction levels, importance, their residents and businesses' feelings about Palo Alto Fiber, and again, the most importantly, those pricing and take rates. So you'll be looking for those in sort of the mid-June period. And finally, the results of the survey, once those come out, you'll get a full report on both of the surveys that give you a number of items that are really covered, right? We look at all the questions, we deliver a full report for you. And what that's going to entail are the most important, business inputs to, Palo Alto's fiber's business plan, which will be looking at the take rates, the product mixes and packages, meaning what speeds do Palo Alto's residents and businesses want, and what distribution will they have? Will your residents have inside of each package? How many customers basically will subscribe to each different service tier in Palo Alto Fiber? We'll also have a price elasticity curve, and this is interesting because through that survey data and that conjoint analysis that we do, it'll allow us to understand the impacts of setting rates at different levels and determining what the demand is. So for example, if we have a $60 package, we may have X take rate. If we lower that price to $55, the take rate may go up 10%. So the data that you'll get will actually allow us and allow you to really understand, how to turn the dial perfectly to get the optimal mix of pricing, take rates, and demand in the community. It will also answer some interesting questions on the city's brand equity versus other providers and the reputational aspect of Palo Alto Fiber versus, existing ISPs. And then what features are going to be most important to residents as Palo Alto Fiber moves forward? Price, brand, speed, customer service, and uploads. And then at the very end of the survey, we also like to leave some anecdotal or sort of an open text box for residents and businesses to write in their own information, right? If they have specific comments, questions, or requests, it's always nice to leave some open text for them to comment, and then we can deliver all of those in the package, right? Things that may not be answered in the survey, or things that we may not have thought about that are also important to your residents and businesses that we want to capture in this opportunity to survey the community. So that's really a review of the two surveys. We are excited to get these launched here with the city and with the communications team. I'd like to kind of open it up to any questions from the commission, though, if you have any about the survey or the community engagement that's been going on.
Thank you, Mr. Honker. Commissioner Johnston has his hand up.
So yes, thank you very much for the presentation. And I participated. I listened to the program. I agree with you that the 80 participants were quite enthusiastic. I thought we got a very positive response from those people. But of course, these are people who are the kind of the people who've been looking forward to this. I continue to, I endorse your thoughts about how to get the survey out to a lot of people and give them reminders to fill it out and so on. I just continue to think it's really, really important that we get as many people as we can to participate in this survey so that we get a realistic idea of what the what the level of enthusiasm across the community, not just the people who are already fired up about it, what their level of enthusiasm is, and what features are going to be most important to them. So it sounds like you're on top of it. I appreciate all that, and thanks very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for the comments. We really think that as that survey goes out, I mean, we're really going to try to hit every channel possible with the city, from the utility billing lists to the Palo Alto Fiber Hub email addresses that are getting collected, to social media, to the website. Wherever there's an opportunity to deliver that survey in a different way, that's a good way to really raise our our response rates.
Right, and making sure we get responses from the whole community, not just the people who are already on board.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Smith? Commissioner Smith?
Yeah, sorry, the mute button. I swear that will be the death of me. My apologies. I too, similar to Commissioner Johnson, participated. I think a number of us did. And I was thrilled. I really liked the presentation, and I really do appreciate what the city is doing, as well as what you and your organization are doing at Magellan, John. So thank you very much. Similar to some of the comments from Commissioner Johnson, the survey in my mind is the telling factor for the council. And if I think you said 200 businesses and 350 residential responses. Is that correct? Is that what, did I hear that correctly? That's what you're anticipated, that's what you hope to get, I think.
Yeah, you're right, Commissioner Smith. Those are really the minimums that we would anticipate getting. Now, we think the response rate in an engaged, community like Palo Alto are going to be significantly higher. So, for example, we just finished a survey mid last year on a very high, high tech community in Utah, in Lehigh, which was very, very sort of similar in demographics and engagement. We expected to get the same levels there at 350 on the residential side. We ended up getting over 1,500 responses, and they came from all different facets of the community. As we got those responses in, we were also able to look to map those and really show kind of on a heat map how well distributed those responses were across all the neighborhoods in Lehigh. And that really also gives you a good understanding of, the neighborhoods, the business districts that are responding, that you've got good inclusion across the community. And we would expect something very similar in Palo Alto.
I certainly hope so. And I think to your point about doing a heat map across the city of Palo Alto, I think this is something and an area perhaps where the ambassador program can play a major role. If you have ambassadors from individual neighborhoods that are literally conducting door-to-door drop-by visits of their neighbors and knocking on the door and saying, please fill out the survey, it's entirely possible that you'll have one neighborhood where you'll have a 90% population participation rate, but the very next neighborhood could be significantly lower, just depending upon the activity level of the ambassador. So just to emphasize that point for the city on the need for an ambassador program to educate the population, as we've discussed since we started talking about this. I am a little concerned about the minimum levels. If we look across 26,000 residences and a take rate of 32%, we're looking, hopefully, even our business plan right now, based upon our business plan at 32% take rate, we're looking at a minimum of 8,300 residences. So at 1,500 responses, I would be a lot more comfortable, were I in city council, I would be a lot more comfortable saying, okay, well, we only need 8,300 and I've got 1,500 responses that all of them said yes. I would be a lot more comfortable in promoting a go decision with respect to that. So in my mind, I mean, I'm not a statistician, but in my mind, our target for statistical results needs to be a lot higher. A lot higher than 1.3%. That's for sure. My biggest worry, and perhaps this is something that perhaps Director Dean Batchelor can help us understand. My biggest worry is if we're getting results back, the earliest results in June, isn't it our intention to take this to City Council in June? And if we are not, are we foregoing or are we pushing out the go, no go decision on fiber to the premise already?
So Commissioner Smith, you're correct. We were planning on probably going to push this out to after the break. I believe
Okay.
council is it July?
I can look it up, but our break starts earlier than usual. Just give me a
Okay.
second. I'll find it on my phone.
Thank you. Commissioner Smith, I'm just checking with Councilmember Cormack, but the plan was that right after they go off their break, that'll give us a little bit of time to actually look at the analysis on this. And then we would be going to the full-blown going back to council right after that.
The first day of our break is scheduled to be June 22nd, and then we're returning in August. Actually, we may be returning in July. Just a sec, let me see. It's slightly easier when I have my reading glasses on, which I don't right now. Yeah, returning on, sorry, just a minute. On technically the 31st, it looks like. So end of July.
End of July.
End of July.
Sorry to put you on the spot. So the plan would be then is when council comes back on break at the end of July, in August, then we would be going to council with the results.
Okay, that's better. It certainly gives us time to get the results back, but it also gives council an opportunity to digest some of the results as they come back. I think we need to, that means increasing the ambassador program or launching the ambassador program earlier than we have. Assuming that we have launched it, then we need to get an active engagement and get those neighborhoods involved now so we can be more secure of a higher level of response. But once those responses come in June, be fully prepared to at least hand council members preliminary results before they go on break, preferably on the 22nd of June, so that they can digest it during break. And then when they come back, they can actually take a look at it in August. And the reason why I focus on this is, and we've discussed this, and council member McCormick has highlighted this, is the fiber to the premise is not in council's core program goals for this year. It may be for next fiscal year, but for this particular year, it's not. So the community's engagement is of primary importance. Thank you.
Vice Chair Siegel?
Thanks. Yeah, I was there for the call as well, and there was a lot of enthusiasm, and I would just, what my fellow commissioners have already said, just to emphasize that these are the, most excited community members who are engaged, aware. I mean, I don't even know what % of community members are aware of what's going on. And so just to second Commissioner Smith's concern about the minimum responses, because it may be whether or not it's statistically significant. I too am not a statistician, but we're not really talking just about statistical significance. We're talking about a huge endeavor, both economically, the disruption and everything else. And I think we want to have more confidence than just statistical significance before we embark on this.
Thanks, Vice Chair Siegel. Yeah, at risk of piling on, I concur with the previous statements. One of the things that occurs to me is that, perhaps because the city has started taking planning, investigating fiber so seriously, AT&T has really upped their fiber offerings. And Comcast has upgraded a bunch of stuff as well. I just want to make sure we're also surveying the people who are on those programs and might be happy to get their views reflected as well. And Councilmember Cormack?
Yeah, just a few quick questions. I'm so sorry. John, I can't see your last name from where I am, so.
It's Honker. Yep.
Okay,
HONKER.
Okay.
Apologies.
No, it's not, there's no reason for you to apologize that it's in teeny print far away from me. Were there any surprises, questions that people asked that you weren't prepared for, or you thought were interesting?
I don't believe we had any curveballs in the council meeting, or I'm sorry, in the community meeting last week. There may have been a couple that were sort of fueled by existing providers that were attending and trying to sort of gauge what the city's doing. So there were a couple of sort of teaser questions out there about, would the city be, competing in the same areas that the other providers are competing in, where fiber may be available. So we did get a couple of those, but all in all, I think the majority of the questions were focused on, where is it going to start? Meaning where is it going to be available first within Palo Alto? What is the pricing going to look like? And how do I sign up for service? Those were most of the questions. So it felt like very much an early adopter type of a community meeting, where we did definitely, as all the commissioners have noted, we did get a lot of enthusiasm about it. So and we typically see that on the front end of these projects. But I think as we get further in, we have to hit those consumers that maybe are not following it as well and are not as just generally enthusiastic about fiber. So we're making sure that the average, well, let's say the non-power users out there and the non-techies out there understand what fiber is and what the benefits are to the community.
Yeah, I'm already happy to see that it has the word internet in the survey and not fiber. What was the biggest concern that people had about the possibility of moving to city fiber?
I don't recall if there were any specific concerns that came out of the survey. That came out of the community meeting last week. We should, we're tallying a list of all the questions because there were a number of questions submitted after the meeting that we're still pouring through. So, we can take a look at those and report back to the UAC. We haven't seen anything that was of specific concern yet, because I feel like the meeting was very much oriented toward, here's the service, the benefits, here's what the city's doing, informational. So I think as we go on, though, there will be more of that voiced. So we want to make sure that we're able to address that, whether it's the financing or the debt or, operations or competition. We just want to have, good answers established for those as we get further into the engagement.
Great, that's really helpful. And then my last thing is when someone, I'm just trying to follow this is not a poll, this is a survey, and you want as many people as possible to take it. Is that right?
You do. The intent is, the more that take it, the better representation of the community.
Okay, and so presumably when someone is finished taking the survey, the last thing that pops up is a link to send to their friends and family?
Well, so the survey is being distributed to just about the entire population. I think we have, over 90% of citizens and businesses that will receive the survey. So there's no option in there right now to sort of forward it to your friends or family, but it's something that we could always evaluate.
I guess the other thing to consider with utilities is often there are multiple people living in a household, but only one person is registered. So I don't think you're actually getting all of the people who live here. If you're targeting our utilities customers, you're getting whoever's name is on the bill. So that's just one thing to contemplate. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Honker. We should move on. So let's go ahead to item number 5 about the amended water supply agreements. And let's start by seeing if there are any members of the public that want to address the commission on this topic.
Anyone from the public would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand. There are no hands raised.
All right, then. I see Carla Daly approaching.
So staff has a presentation on this, and Lisa Belair, our senior resource planner underneath our water, will be giving this presentation. So with that, Lisa, go ahead, please.
Yes, good evening, commissioners and council member Cormac. My name is Lisa Belair, acting senior resource planner in the resource management division, and I am just going to try once more to share my screen. Okay, are you seeing the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. So I wanted to talk to you tonight about the minimum purchase amendment, and this is an amendment to the water supply agreement. The water supply agreement is a contract that Palo Alto and 25 other wholesale customers have with San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. This is a contract that protects our water supply and financial interests. And the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency has been instrumental in pulling together these amendments to the water supply agreement by hosting meetings with staff from the wholesale customers over a 2 to 3 year period. The Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency, or BOSCA, is a government agency, a special district that was created by the legislature in 2003, and they provide a representative voice for Palo Alto and the other wholesale customers before the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. There's a lot of terms in this presentation, so I'm going to define a couple of terms before I go too much further, but let me just show you the agenda. I'm going to talk about the 2 amendments and then talk about the adoption process. So basically, in order to talk about this minimum purchase amendment, I want to define what is a minimum purchase requirement. Of the 26 wholesale customers, 4 have a minimum purchase requirement. What that means is that they may purchase water from other sources other than the San Francisco Regional Water System, but they're obligated to purchase a minimum amount of water in each annual period from the SFPUC. And the purpose of that minimum purchase requirement is actually a protection for Palo Alto and other wholesale customers to make sure that there isn't too much volatility in the water sales and revenues from those agencies that have the option to purchase water from other sources. And I also want to talk about what is an individual supply guarantee. An individual supply, San Francisco has an obligation to provide 184 million gallons per day of water to the wholesale customers, and that's referred to as the supply assurance. And that supply assurance is allocated among the wholesale customers, and those shares of the supply assurance are called individual supply guarantee. And what this amendment does is allows for the paired transfer of of individual supply guarantee and minimum purchase requirement. So basically, there are some wholesale customers, those four wholesale customers that have a minimum purchase requirement. Some of those agencies want to be able to reduce that minimum purchase requirement. And there are some wholesale customers that want to be able to purchase individual supply guarantee. And so this is a mechanism to allow that type of transaction to occur. Palo Alto does not have a minimum purchase requirement, and Palo Alto has sufficient individual supply guarantee for its current and future needs. So Palo Alto itself would not be a current or future participant in this type of transaction. And so our interest in this amendment really is making sure that Palo Alto is not affected. Palo Alto's financial or water supply interests are not changed or affected by other utilities entering into this type of transaction. And in the past, transfers of individual supply guarantee have been able to occur because those are a bilateral transaction between two wholesale customers. However, the minimum purchase requirement has not been able to really be moved from one agency to another because it's something that requires all the wholesale customers to approve it. And this amendment allows for some relief for an agency that wants to transfer some of its minimum purchase requirement in a way that hasn't been available before. So to kind of start telling you a little bit more about the specifics of the amendment and some of the protections that are in place for Palo Alto, we're confident that with these protections that I'm going to describe, that this amendment does not affect Palo Alto's financial risks or water supply risks in any way. So what this allows for, again, is a paired transfer of minimum purchase requirement and individual supply guarantee. Those minimum purchase requirements may only be transferred among wholesale customers that have an ISG, and there are 3 wholesale customers that don't have an ISG. The transfer, there's a couple limits on the transfers. One is that all of the possible transfers that can result from this amendment may only add up to 6 MGD, 6 million gallons per day. And that's of the total current minimum purchase requirement among those 4 agencies of about 31 MGD. And there's also a limit for each of the agencies that they may only transfer up to half of their original minimum purchase requirement. And then the bullet here that says Palo Alto's financial interests are protected. Basically, the agency that has the minimum purchase requirement currently has to pay for that minimum amount, and if they don't actually purchase those amounts of water, they have to pay for the imputed sales. So that requirement, that obligation to pay for those imputed sales, is transferred to the agency that's taking on the minimum purchase requirement as part of this transaction. And I'm just going to talk through the words, the long acronym that's in the bullets here. Basically, the agency that has the minimum purchase requirement, currently, we're going to call that the transferor. That transferor transfers to the transferee, who now has that minimum purchase requirement obligation and the ISG that went with it. That transferee is then subject to a temporary modified minimum purchase quantity, which basically means that they must pay for the same amount of water that they were previously using for the past 5 years and the new minimum purchase requirement that they have taken on the responsibility for. And they must do that until they have developed the water supply and started using that water supply and actually purchasing all of that water for 3 years, 3 consecutive years. So once they have actually shown that they're using that water supply, they will then get a new minimum purchase requirement equal to the amount that they purchased from the transferor originally. Do we want to stop for questions, or shall I continue?
Are there any commissioners with questions? Go ahead.
On this slide, I think I've walked through the bullet points here already, other than the last point, which is that Palo Alto transferred an amount of ISG of half an MGD in 2017 to East Palo Alto. And that was a different type of transaction, just a transfer of ISG. Palo Alto, again, doesn't have a minimum purchase requirement, and neither does East Palo Alto. So it was just a different type of transaction, and it's not related to this amendment. There are some benefits of this proposed water supply agreement amendment, primarily having to do with the, removing barriers to the more efficient use of water in the regional water system. And I wanted to highlight the one here from that the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission has indicated that removing this type of barrier to potential transfers is going to make it easier for them to develop other new supplies of water. And that's important as part of their alternative water supply program, where they're trying to develop other sources of water supply and not just rely only on the regional water system, water from the Tuolumne River. As we face climate change and other emergencies and other risks to the water supply. So it's helpful in order to remove that barrier. And it protects, as I mentioned, it removes existing barrier for those minimum purchase agencies that wish to lower their minimum purchase requirement. And it protects Palo Alto's rights and obligations and the obligations and rights of all the other non-participating agencies. And additionally, as a side benefit, it will likely increase purchases from the regional water system, which will reduce the unit cost for all of the other WASC agencies. Okay, now I just have one slide on the Second Amendment, and this is a specific transfer that is related to East Palo Alto and the city of Mountain View. Basically, in 2017, Mountain View transferred 1 MGD of individual supply guarantee to East Palo Alto, and now the cities of East Palo Alto and Mountain View have gotten together, and their councils would like to go ahead and add a transfer of minimum purchase requirement to that transaction. Basically, they wish that they had the opportunity to do a paired transfer similar to the amendment number 1 that I described. And so they're going to try to, over time, through quarter MGD increments, they're going to try to they're asking for all the other agencies to approve the paired transfer of their individual supply guarantee and minimum purchase requirement.
Can I ask you, I'm sorry, can you explain that, how the quarter MGD, how that, I don't quite understand that.
I believe that what it is that they are gonna, the ISG transaction has already happened in 2017. So now a quarter of an MGD at a time, they're going to transfer, the councils are going to agree only a quarter of an MGD at a time to add that quarter of an MGD to their past 5 years of purchases and have that new requirement that they pay for the past 5 years of purchases as well as the minimum purchase, the quarter of an MGD. It's just a gradual way of implementing this, I believe. And it's what the cities of Mountain View and East Palo Alto negotiated as part of their separate agreement. And I didn't want to misspeak, but the city of East Palo Alto, the city of Mountain View is going to be paying for that additional minimum purchase requirement, not the city of East Palo Alto.
I just want to, Commissioner Smith had his hand up since a while ago. Do you want to jump in?
Thank you, Chair. I read this and thank you for your presentation. So there's an agreement in place with the supplier for the wholesale customers to buy, and they must buy to a minimum level. But the way I read this is that there are some wholesale customers who no longer need the amount that's mandated under the minimum supply, and they want an out clause. That's kind of how I read this. We, the city of Palo Alto, have no intention of changing ours, but we need to ratify the amendment in order for other wholesale customers to do this. So, okay, so that's fine.
That's exactly right.
If that is indeed the case, is there a danger that the SFPUC will somehow, I'm going against climate change right now, but somehow have this massive oversupply of water and we create a larger issue? Or is there, when you say this creates the opportunity for the San Francisco Water Commission to search for new sources, is it simply because we're looking at the fact that the Tuolumne River will not always be there? What's the good side for San Francisco?
So the San Francisco has an alternative water supply program. They are pursuing, they are investigating and trying to develop other sources of water as part of their water supply portfolio. And it's just that they have said that it will make it easier for them to do that work in order to, if this type of transaction can occur. But
let me ask you this: if we agree to let our partners buy less or not buy their minimum amount, which is an agreed upon rate with San Francisco, are we giving San Francisco Regional Water System the ability to charge a higher rate to another customer if they have a supply that's not being sold? Or is San Francisco Regional Water Supply, are they regulated by, for example, the state, and they can't just adjust the price that low?
no, this isn't going to change the way that their wholesale customer rate is calculated, which is based upon the revenue requirement needed for the wholesale customers. So they are not going, the contract is still going to be in place, and the wholesale customers are going to continue to pay the price for water, which is not different for one wholesale customer versus another wholesale customer.
Okay. And the reason why we would want this is simply because we would also like the flexibility. Is that
it really, we don't really want to enter into a transaction like this now or in the future, but there are some, we don't think it has any negative impact to Palo Alto in terms of our water supply, and may have some regional benefits.
And the regional benefits would be?
The regional benefits, yeah, let me go back to that slide. So there are, in addition to San Francisco indicating that it will help, in order to have this barrier removed, it will help them to develop other new supplies. The other benefits listed here are to basically promote the efficient use of water is consistent with state law. State and environmental agencies support this concept, and water transfers between BOSCA agencies offer a potential cost-effective water supply to meet new needs for new development within the service area. So
okay, so I can see promote efficient use. If I have too much water, I don't want to just simply pour it out into the street. And state and environmental agencies would not want us to waste water. I get that. SFPUC has indicated that removing this barrier to potential transfers will make it easier for them to develop other new supplies as necessary. I don't see how that happens. How does that happen? Why can't they just do it now without this?
Well, okay, so they have this obligation to provide 184 million gallons per day, but the wholesale customers as a whole are using significantly less than that. I think 130, I want to say, was the number from 2020.
Okay.
And so there's the potential to, they want to be able to show that they're using the water supply that they are obligated to provide in as efficient way as possible. But again, the amount of transfers that can occur as a result of this are 6 MGD. So there's a limit on the total amount of transfers that can occur.
Okay, perhaps I'm missing something, but if there's 50 million gallons per year that's not being used, I assume that's waste, and that's the efficiency side, correct?
Carla, do you want to chime in?
Sure. So I think, just at a high level, these types of transactions just result in a more efficient regional water system, that those who need to and can use the water, their contracts reflect that appropriately, and those who have these minimum purchase requirements that they can't meet also are not saddled with this obligation if they are able to enter into one of these agreements. But at a very practical level, there are 4 agencies with minimum purchase requirements. They have been advocating for this type of amendment for a number of years, and Palo Alto and the other agencies who don't have this requirement said, we are fine with that as long as we are protected financially and for our water supply. And so over the 2 to 3 years that we've negotiated this with our attorney engaged in these discussions, we are comfortable with the amendments as they've been written, that Palo Alto doesn't have any risk, and that overall it's going to help these other agencies and make the total system more efficient and more logical. So that's kind of what it boils down to.
I absolutely get the fact that we want to relieve some of the burden of our fellow communities who, quite frankly, don't want to be kept to a minimum purchase agreement when they don't need it, or one they can't afford it. I get that. That's easy. I don't, and I also get the efficiency. If you can break it up into smaller increments, or give the consumer, in this case, the consumer, more flexibility as to purchase the exact amount that they want, then I think that's a more efficient distribution system. But I don't understand the other half of the equation, and I guess I just need to read deeper into this, because I don't understand why the San Francisco regional water system cannot develop additional resources without this being passed, especially if they are.
Yeah. Commissioner Smith, I think we're going to turn to a couple other voices, and then, perhaps I'll shed some more light on it for you. Councilmember Cormack.
So Commissioner Smith, one of my other hats is I'm our BOSCA director. So let me just offer a few overall comments. This is a difficult area, okay? If it's helpful at its shorthand, you can think of a minimum purchase agreement as a floor, right? Not us, but 4 of the 26 have to purchase that. And you can think of the ISG, the individual supply guarantee, as a ceiling. Now, recently, I shared a slide with my colleagues that indicates we have 6 million MGD? What's the number, Carla? Yeah, but the delta between what we use and what? So we use on a daily basis 6 million. We could use 6 million MGD more than we do. Okay, so we have a very high ceiling. In fact, the delta in terms of water we could use each day is the largest for us of all the 26 agencies. Many of these agencies, because this whole agreement was put together a while ago, want more. East Palo Alto, our neighbor, is a perfect example, right? They want a higher ceiling because it's preventing them from being able to do all of the things that they would like to do in their community. Now, the other thing that maybe isn't 100% clear is we do these water supply amendments. I think this is the 3rd time I've seen one on council. They go to all 26 agencies. So I hesitate to say that they're routine, but it isn't. We're not seeing this because it's, quote, relevant to us. We're seeing this because we are part of the BOSCA system, and therefore it goes to everybody. The other point I wanted to make is you said there was maybe there was water that was wasted between the 130 and the 184. There's no wasted water. It's not used. It's actually not purchased. So I think that the last bullet here that they're talking about, to the extent that you move a minimum purchase guarantee with some ISG, right? And there'd be a reason for the 4 agencies who are interested in doing that. Then that other customer who wants more water, has a higher ISG, is able to purchase more water. And I know that those of us on this commission understand that the larger the volume, then the lower the amount of the fixed costs that are spread across. So I don't know if any of that's helpful, but I just wanted to share some of those thoughts as you consider this before you decide what to recommend to the council.
Thank you.
Commissioner Johnston?
Thank you. Actually, and kind of following up on Councilmember Cormack's questions, I'm fine with the amendments. I'm comfortable that Palo Alto is protected and that these amendments make sense for the system. But I had some questions. Just I think I heard Councilmember Cormack say that we have a 6 million gallons per day surplus between what our ISG is and what we're actually using. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So my question really is, have we looked at how much more water we would use, more than we're currently using, if we built out all of the housing that we are supposed to under the, was it RENA or whoever it is that sets the housing allowances? In other words, I'm trying to get comfortable that we have plenty of surplus water.
Yes, we have. And Lisa, do you want to speak to how we did our demand forecast under the Urban Water Management Plan and our back of the envelope on the RENA numbers?
Sure. Yes, we used the comprehensive plan population growth numbers for the Urban Water Management Plan that shows that there's in the future 2040 there's still a big difference between the individual supply guarantee and the amount of water that we're actually using or projected to use. We also did a back of the envelope calculation using the RENA numbers and found that when we incorporated the RENA numbers and projected those out into the future, there was also enough ISG to cover those additional needs in the future.
Okay, well that's great, and I'm obviously that's something we got to keep an eye on as you know, if and when we increase housing supply significantly.
Sorry to interrupt, Ms. Belier. It's possible that that graph that you prepared might be helpful to the commissioners. The one that we used for the colleagues memo a few weeks ago.
I can try to find that and pull it up if
this may be going up, you know, a far afield from what we're supposed to be discussing tonight. So I was just curious, but I am interested. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe Lisa Belier, that's something you can email out to the commissioners.
Okay.
After this, Vice Chair Siegel, go ahead.
Thanks. Okay, so I think I'm going to try to understand this, and I do have a separate question. So as I understand it, there's this 184 million gallons a day, and let's call that the pie. And Mountain View has a minimum purchase, so they have to purchase a slice of that pie, and it's more than they can eat. And so they want to give a slice, they want to cut off some of their slice and give it to East Palo Alto. Is that right?
they, yes.
Okay,
And
so
in
it's
that case, they already did give that slice, and now they're trying to do they wish that they could have basically followed amendment number 1 and also done a paired transfer of their minimum purchase requirement.
so that every year going forward, East Palo Alto has to buy that slice of pie and Mountain View doesn't have to budget for it in the future. it's East Palo Alto's obligation, right?
That would be the way that it works under the amendment number 1. In this particular instance with East Palo Alto and Mountain View, because they had already entered into that transaction, then there's different financial obligations, and Mountain View is continuing to pay for that.
That's the quarter piece of the pie or whatever, to continue on the metaphor over. Okay. So then my question is really related, but not that one. So 2 questions is some of our costs and some of the, as I understand, some of the increased costs has to do with maintenance across the system, retrofitting for earthquakes and whatnot. So will those financial obligations for all the members, is it a pro rata part that goes to East Palo Alto, or are we going to get some kind of benefit? Because I'm kind of with Commissioner Smith. I don't really understand those other benefits, but is it an extra member or a bigger commitment that they're going to be paying, or is that just going to be the pro rata piece that they get from Mountain View?
There's not going to be any change to Palo Alto in our obligation, other than the point that if there's an additional sales in one of the utilities that really wants more ISG, that will reduce the overall rate that San Francisco charges to wholesale customers, including Palo Alto, because they'll take their revenue requirement and then divide it by a larger number.
Got it. Okay. And then also on the flip side of that, if there is some kind of reduction, some kind of drought restriction that's mandated, will that also, whatever restriction that's going to be imposed, on the pie slice that Mountain View gets, will that pro rata restriction will be to East Palo Alto, so that again, we're not impacted in any way?
Under the amendment, we took a look at what would happen when there's a drought waiver, because in a drought, San Francisco can waive those minimum purchase requirements so that they're not encouraging the use of water during a drought. And so we did take a look, and Bosca developed some spreadsheets for us that indicated that our risks and our financial impacts to Palo Alto are unchanged, when this type of transaction happens or whether it doesn't. So it doesn't impact Palo Alto during a drought.
Great. Okay. That all makes sense and I support it. Thanks.
All right. Let's see, maybe we've reached the point where you could put up the proposed
Yes. Recommended
motion, and then does anybody want to make a motion?
I'll move to accept the motion as proposed.
I'll second.
Was that you, Commissioner Mess? No, that was AC. All right. Great. So I will go ahead and go down the roster. Commissioner Johnston,
I approve.
Commissioner Smith,
I still have questions, but I do approve.
Vice Chair Siegel,
Approve.
Commissioner Metz,
Approve.
and I approve as well. Okay, so we often take a break about halfway through the meeting, and I think we're at about that point. So I propose we take a brief break. By my watch, it's 7:52. Why don't we come back at 8:02 and keep going with the rest of the agenda? All right. Welcome back, everybody. I think we're ready to keep going. Have we lost Commissioner Smith? Okay, that's unfortunate. We are down to a skeleton crew. Let's keep going. The next item is, so now we're entering the section of budget and rate increases in financial plan for several of the utilities, starting with water, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. Is there a?
Keep going. Have we lost?
Who's speaking? Oh, there was an echo. Okay. Anyway, are there any members of the public wishing to speak on agenda item number 6, the water utility financial plan?
If there's anyone from the public who would like to speak on this water plan item, please raise your hand. No hands are raised.
All right. Is there a staff presentation?
There is Chair Facel. So Lisa Bolier will also be leading this, as well as the sewer updates as we get to it. So with that, Lisa, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this item is on the water utility financial plan and proposed rate changes for fiscal year 23. And we did last speak with you, I think, in December, and there have been a few changes since then. So I'm going to try to focus on some of those changes in this presentation. In particular, I want to tell you about the San Francisco Public Utility Commission rate increase, preliminary rate increase proposals, and touch on bill impacts and bill comparisons that are updated since then. I'm going to jump to the overview of our water rate proposal. But I'm happy to go back to any of the slides if you have any questions or want to go through all of them. So the proposal is for a 4% distribution rate increase in fiscal year 23 with 4% annually in each subsequent year. And the water rate increase is really important in order to pay for the needed infrastructure and maintenance, including the seismic upgrades for 1 reservoir that's ongoing and 2 reservoirs in the forecast period, as well as the ongoing main replacement and generators for wildfire and emergencies. This forecast does include some reductions in revenue due to drought. For the distribution revenue, we're expecting a net reduction of about $2.6 million in fiscal year 22. And then to touch on the San Francisco rate increase, San Francisco in January announced that it was looking at a rate range of 15 to 25% increase. And so that, and then they've refined that a little bit. The latest estimate from February is that it will likely be 15.9% increase. So in these slides, I've really shown that range of it's 15.1 to 25.1, but the likely number is 15.9%. And the water utility has quite a lot of reserves, and this plan uses those reserve balances to moderate the distribution rate increases. The operations reserve is at the maximum guideline level with additional $7 million in above that level. And those dollars are planned to be used within 1 year to pay for the operational costs and capital costs of the water utility. The rate stabilization reserve also has $9 million, and those funds are also going to be used during this financial forecast period to mitigate the rate increases on the distribution side. And then the CIP reserve has sufficient funds, and there's a recommendation at the end of this presentation that there's actually, the recommendation is to transfer 13.964 million out of the CIP reserve. And that is because there's actually $25 million of CIP planned in 2022. And of that, 11 million is funded through funds that were collected in previous years and are now available through reappropriations and commitments reserves. So basically the remaining 14 million, we're requesting to use the funds in the CIP reserve to pay for that. So let me talk about the overall impact. Okay, so I wanted to say a couple of other things about the SFPUC rate increase. We expect that San Francisco will issue a notice of their rate increase in mid-March, and then the rate increase will go to their commission in May. And so once we know what that increase is going to be, we will be noticing the customers in Palo Alto to make sure that they have 30 days of notice via their billing statements. And that will be a pass-through charge to Palo Alto customers. We are expecting that it will go into effect July 1st at the same time as the distribution rate increase. But I'm not completely sure how the timing will work out. And the primary reason for that large increase from San Francisco is because of the projected drop in sales for all the wholesale customers. As a whole, the wholesale customers are being requested to reduce their usage by 14% in 2022. So even though Palo Alto has a reduction request of about 8%, Palo Alto is being requested to reduce by 8%. But because collectively they all need to cut back by 14%, it ends up being a significant rate increase. We did include this alternate scenario that assumes, and I should say that we're assuming for the distribution rate increase that, as I said, we have some reductions in revenue in 2022, and then we're assuming that things get back to normal by 2024. 23 is sort of a recovery year. So this alternate scenario looks at a situation where the drought continues and worsens in 2023. So there's an additional 4.2 net reduction in revenue in 2023 in this scenario. And I think it's helpful because it gives you a sense of how sensitive the water the water rate increase is on the distribution side, that even with that pretty significant reduction in revenue in 2023, that the rate increase goes from a 4% to a 5% increase on the distribution side. So that's what we're trying to illustrate with this scenario. Okay, I wanted to tell you about the bill impacts. I'm going to talk about the middle line there of an annual median usage customer with a current bill of $90.42. That would increase depending upon San Francisco's increase, together with the 4% increase on the distribution rate side. It will increase the annual median bill from by 9 to 13%, or from $7.77 to $11.46. And on the commercial side, then the median for commercial customers will increase again 9 to 13%, or $9.95 to $14.87.
Sorry, the SFPUC rate increases are called out here. Remind me, what's the distribution rate increase percentage?
Yes, actually it's combined here. So this is the 4% distribution rate increase combined with either a 15.1% or a 25.1.
It's just the 4% doesn't appear on the chart. So that's what we keep in mind. Perfect.
Is that clear, or did you still have a question? Sorry.
Nope, you answered it. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so this shows the cost and revenue projections. You can see that revenue declining there in 2022 with the drought conditions, and then we've modeled that it will continue to increase. And then the orange bars, the bars on the chart are the costs. The orange bars show the capital, but this is actually showing the transfers from the operations reserve to the capital reserve. So these are not necessarily the planned amount of spending on capital. Just wanted to call that out. The green is the operations costs, and then the water supply costs in the blue. I think I wanted to jump straight to the bill comparisons with neighboring utilities, unless there are any questions. But this is the group of utilities that we typically compare Palo Alto's rates to, because it's a group of cities or other utilities that a Palo Alton might instinctively compare themselves to. And you can see the other utilities that have 100% Hetchy water supply are highlighted in the bold color. So it's Redwood City and Hayward. And then we also have comparisons of Menlo Park, Mountain View, and Santa Clara that have some lower rates and because they have other sources of water. And then I have also a comparison on the commercial side. The difference is much less between Palo Alto and the other neighboring utilities. And so the recommendation for the water utility is that staff is requesting that the Utility Advisory Commission recommend that the council adopt a resolution approving the financial plan, approving the transfer that I mentioned that will allow access to the funds in the capital improvement projects reserve, and increasing the water utility rates through the amendment of the rate schedules. And I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
Are there any commissioners with questions or comments? Commissioner Johnston?
So thank you very much for the presentation. I had a couple of questions. I mean, back when you presented this to us in December, you were thinking for the water utility, there would be we'd be looking at 4% increases. And I wasn't clear actually whether that was the bill increase or whether that was just on the distribution. But I take it the reason we're looking at a higher increase now is because largely or maybe entirely because the SFPUCs increased their water supply cost.
Yes, I believe at that time, the San Francisco was the most recent information that we had at that time was I think that they were going to do a 5% increase. So it shifted from 5% up to, between 15 and 25. So that's one of the primary reasons. We did refine the water rate model during that time as well, refining the CIP budget and then the assumptions that we were basing our costs on to reflect the long-range financial forecast numbers and our best estimates of the cost forecasts.
So when SFPUC says they're going to come up with this, what I would consider to be very large rate increase, I mean, what opportunity do we have to push back on that and make sure that that's really something that's justified?
Yeah, we can. So what they have done is they're not really changing their revenue requirement. They're just looking at a significant reduction in sales. There's also a balancing account that the wholesale customers have. Currently, that balancing account has about $86 million to our credit in it. And San Francisco is applying the balance in that balancing account to 2022 and 2023, about half in each year. And so that's mitigating the increase. But because they were already planning to apply the balance in the balancing account, even though it wasn't quite so large, it doesn't have the type of effect that we would really like to see in terms of bringing down the rate increase. I think I think we could see if they could apply that balancing account more quickly, but then they might have to do a larger increase in the subsequent year.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would advocate for that. It just, to me, it's, I mean, I'm sure you've done this, but I mean, why are they projecting such a much larger or much decreased amount of sales all of a sudden? I mean, that is just
because, yeah. So in November, San Francisco declared a drought emergency and requested 10% reduction system-wide, regional water system-wide. And the way that they achieve that 10% cutback is they need 14% from the wholesale customers and less from the retail customers. So if the wholesale customers cut back by 14%, then that is that much less sales that they're projecting. However, it's even more than 14% cutback from what they use for rate making purposes when they set the current rates. So it's really driven by that projection on the water sales side.
Okay, and so when they request a 14% cutback, they're plan assumes that that cutback will be achieved.
Yes.
Okay. I think you said that the actual rate increase was going to be about 15.9%.
Yes.
And so on your table there, the table that's shown on slide 9 that you put up, if we talked about a 15.9% increase, how would that affect the monthly bill? It looks to me like it would be a little higher than
Yes.
what's shown here in the middle column.
I don't have it on the slide, but I have it in my notes. It's for the 9 CCF of usage, it would be $98.46 instead of the $98.19. So instead of a $7.77 increase, it's a $8.04 increase. So it's most similar to the change shown in the column of the 15.1%.
So it's like a 9.5% increase.
Oh, yes, it's still yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So one thing that I think one thing that would be helpful is when you showed us these figures back in December, you gave us a chart that showed what the customer's monthly bill would look like with all of the utilities, not just a single utility.
Yes.
And I looked through the packet of materials today, and I didn't see a similar chart. But
okay, I do have
found that very helpful before.
I do have the latest version of that if you'd like me to turn to it.
Yes, that would be interesting to me.
Okay. I'm going to try to find it. It's in the same deck, but I don't want to just be.
We could. The same question comes up when we go to each of the individual utilities. So you don't have to do it now, but to me, it's helpful to look at the overall impact of all of these rate increases on the customer. So, I mean, what are they really going to see at the end of the day when they get their bill? Because I don't think customers will look at these on a line by line item necessarily. They're mainly interested in what's my monthly, how much is my monthly bill increase?
Right. And now that I see this on a large screen, it doesn't look very clear. I hope you can see it. But this is the chart. This number is just including the distribution rate. This number is just including the distribution rate.
Right, which is not very helpful because we know that the customer has to pay for the water as well as the distribution. Okay, well, it would be interesting to me if to see these, so you can really see what the impact to the customer is. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, I think the rate increases you're talking about are justified. So I'm not, but it's still helpful, I think, to see it in context. So those are my comments. Thank you for the presentation.
Thanks, Commissioner Johnston. Commissioner Metz, Vice Chair Siegel, are there any additional questions or comments?
Yeah, I had, coming into tonight, I had a question for this, actually for all the financial plans, which was, what is the plan or contingency in the financial plans to address the housing mandates that we face? Essentially the question that Mr. Johnson asked before. In discussing with Director Batchelor, it sounds like that's not baked into the financial plans. But, I think we'd all agree that, at least certainly in the out years, that, that could have a significant impact. So I guess I'd switch the question into a request that we, start doing our out year planning to incorporate that consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Siegel?
Yeah, my only comment, I think Commissioner Johnson addressed most of my questions, but my only comment is if we know we're going to have this huge rate increase for water, and maybe some others, that we could do a better job than we did with the gas rate increase and let customers know a little ahead of time as well as we can with some of the ideas that we talked about before for gas, because, you know, it's a lot.
Yeah, that's noted. We actually did do some outreach in the fall, trying to warn folks about the upcoming gas commodity price increases. So we should go back and look at how we did that and maybe ways to get the word out better. But we did try and stay ahead of that. And we have been talking to Catherine Elvert about these water commodity rates as well.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Let's see, I have one question. So you might have covered this and I apologize. I just want to go back to the 13.9 million transfer from capital improvement to operations. What is the motivation for that? Especially because the operation reserve, if I recall, ended the previous fiscal year maxed out.
Yeah, it's really that we believe that council approval is necessary to access the money in the CIP reserve. And so we just want to be sure to check the box of making sure that we have authority to access that funding when we do the end of year transfers at the end of 2022.
I'm sorry, I still don't understand. Why does the money need to be transferred?
Because it can't be spent directly from that reserve as far as it is set up right now.
I see. So to pay for capital improvement projects, the money has to be transferred from the CIP reserve to the operations reserve. And from there, checks can be cut to contractors, whatever.
That is my understanding, yes.
Okay, so I completely misunderstood that. Thank you for clarifying. I thought it was like transferring it so that because the capital improvement projects weren't happening. It's precisely because they are
a little
happening.
bit more administrative.
Yeah, got it. And let me just check. Yeah, that was it for me. Are we ready to move to a motion? Do you want to put it up on the screen?
Yes. Oops.
All right. Would any commissioners like to make a motion?
I'll move that we adopt the staff recommendation.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Commissioner Johnston,
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Siegel,
Approve.
Commissioner Metz,
Approve.
I approve as well. So that motion carries. And we can move on to the next utility, which is the wastewater collection utility financial plan. Let's start and see if there are any members of the public wishing to comment on the wastewater utility financial plan.
If anyone from the public would like to speak about the FY23 wastewater collection financial plan, please raise your hand. No hands are raised.
All right, then let's keep going. Lisa Belair, is that you again?
Yes.
Excellent. Go ahead.
Sharing my screen. One moment. Okay, so wastewater collection utility. I'm gonna start with an overview of the proposal, and this really hasn't changed much from when we came to you in December. This is a proposal for a 3% overall revenue increase in 2023 and a similar type of transfer from the CIP reserve to the operations reserve to ensure that there's proper approval for the use of those funds. And we are expecting some significant increases in the treatment plant debt service costs, particularly in 2027, as the debt service for some of their projects comes online. And so to prepare for that, this plan transfers $1 million in each year, fiscal year 25 and 26, to the rate stabilization reserve, and then takes those funds out in 2027 to smooth the increase as a result of that increase in cost. The wastewater utility is experiencing still some revenue impacts associated with reductions in usage on the non-residential side. And we're expecting that to be approximately $1 million in 2022. And this plan, those revenues do seem to be recovering a little bit, but are still about 12% below pre-COVID levels on the commercial side, and still about 20% below pre-COVID levels on the restaurant side. And so we're modeling the recovery by 2026 of those revenues included in this projection. And the future years are projected at 5% each year. The reserves, the operations reserve remains within the guideline range, but again, because of those debt service increases, as well as because of the increases, the ongoing CIP needs in the collection system, the operations reserve does go down close to the minimum, but then it comes back up to closer to the target guideline level. Let's see. This is the rate impact, $1.30 on the residential side. And then I'm going to actually, to tell you about the non-residential, I'm going to go to the next slide because this gives you example usage for commercial, showing that it could go increase by about $3.40 for a bill of 14 CCF. And on the restaurant side, it could go from an increase of about $20.28 with this level of increase. I'm actually going to skip because I wanted to go to show you, because you've seen a lot of this already, and I wanted to show you the comparison of the monthly residential bills with neighboring utilities. Again, same group of neighboring utilities. Palo Alto is below the comparison city average here. And the other utilities that are on this chart that have the same treatment plant are Los Altos and Hayward. Los Altos and Hayward, Los Altos and Mountain View. And Mountain View is a little bit higher than Palo Alto, and Los Altos is a little bit lower. Los Altos has a lot of reserves, and so their rates do not fund their capital program. On the non-residential side, it's a bit more of a mix. Palo Alto's rate is 7% higher than the comparison city average for commercial and 14% below the comparison city average for restaurant. This shows the rate increase projections for each year. The red line is the revenue, and you can see it recovering from the COVID reductions as well as from the rate increases. And then you can see on the cost side, the stacked bars show the treatment costs in blue, treatment operations in light blue, and then treatment capital and debt in the darker blue. And you can see that big increase in 2027. And then the collection operation costs in green are increasing, and the collection capital costs, there's really very little debt. So this is again representing primarily those funds that are set aside in the CIP reserve. And the CIP reserve also close to the minimum, but remaining within the guideline range throughout the forecast period. And the recommendation is to request that the UAC recommend that the council adopt a resolution approving the financial plan and including the 3% overall revenue increase, the transfer of $5.33 million from the CIP reserve to the operations reserve, and to increase the wastewater collection utility rates through the amendment of those rate schedules listed on the slide. Be happy to talk about any questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Johnston, go ahead.
This is a little bit of a random question, but on slide 9, you talk about increases for salary and benefit costs for existing staff. And I'm just curious, what percentage increase are you using for that? Because I assume that's true for all of the utilities.
Sorry, the percentages are different for each utility, and because it's depending upon what's included in the budget. I think the number is like, I want to say it's 5% or something percentage increase for 2023, but I do actually need to check that. It's a fairly significant increase.
Okay.
But for the later years, we are using more what's projected in the long range financial forecast.
Okay. And now you've got my curiosity. Would change from utility because of the mix of staff, or does it have more to do with hiring additional people?
I'm not the best person to answer that, but what I think is that it has to do with the amount of work that's planned, like in each utility, as well as you said, the amount of staff.
Okay, thank you.
So maybe I can just clarify that with you, Commissioner Johnson. So that salary and benefit cost is based off of about a 4 or 5% increase. And that cost is that typically we spread those costs throughout the operations for water, gas, and wastewater. But there are some increase in headcount that are being charged 100% towards that wastewater account, and they're not spread.
This is Dave, and I also want to add one more thing. I think budget bases these salary and benefits on actuals. So it's based on employee salaries and also based on the benefits they elect. So it's not based on across the board percentages.
Or percentage, right?
So they may fluctuate.
All right, now I'm not sure I understood that, but I don't want to get into a side discussion on that. So thank you.
Commissioner Metz.
Yeah, I had a question on this one. There's some very large capital projects, and I wonder if you could just touch on, without any description, and that added up to a couple $100 million. Secondary treatment upgrade, headworks facility, lab ops building. Could you just touch on what that means?
Lisa, do you want me to take this?
Sure.
So this,
Karen, before you go, I was going to just try to explain the chart that shows how those costs are incorporated in the wastewater utility. And I'm just going to try to find that chart, this one. So those hundreds of millions are shared, and the Palo Alto share is shown in this chart. So you can see just the Palo Alto share of this cost in this dark blue component of this chart. That may help to see how it fits into this utility. But I'm so happy that Karen jumped in and that she will talk more about those dollars.
That's a good point. Ballpark, what's our share?
It's about 33 to 34%, but it depends. It's approximately that.
Okay.
did you have specific questions about the treatment plant that we're basically rebuilding? That I can help?
Just what it means for $150 million.
Can you put that list back up, the list of projects?
Yes.
So I think the one that you're talking about is the secondary treatment upgrade.
Right.
So probably something we have not come to the commission and discussed, but there's new regulations that are coming down the pipeline that we need to remove nutrients. And our current sewage treatment plant removes ammonia, but it discharges nitrogen out into the bay. So the secondary treatment upgrade will actually remove most of the nitrogen out before it goes out into the bay. And so it's basically creating an anoxic zone and an oxic zone. So if you understand the chemistry, But we're utilizing all of our tanks, but we have to put in a lot of upgraded electrical. We have to actually provide baffles and separate the zones within the tanks. And so it's a very complicated project, and most sewage treatment plants are actually upgrading their systems at this point in time to remove nutrients.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have questions on any of the other ones?
Well, what's a headworks facility?
Sure. So headworks facility is, as you can imagine, when all of the wastewater comes into the wastewater treatment plant, currently it goes into a very old headworks facility that's got a bar screen to take out any of the rags and then and any of the solids that we can quickly get out of the system. So basically it protects our pumps. And so we have to rebuild that whole facility as well. So if you ever want a tour of our facility, we'd be happy to give it to you. You know, it's aging, and basically we have to rebuild the whole facility.
Great. Actually, I have been over there, but anyway.
Yeah, and it's complicated because we need to run and operate and discharge and treat the water at the same time as rebuilding the facility. So it's very complicated.
Sounds it. Well, thank you for explaining it.
Absolutely. Any other questions?
I do, but Tabitha Boatwright has caught my eye. Is there something we need to know?
For those of you who can hear but cannot see, the last speaker was Karen North. She's the Assistant Director for the Public Works.
Thank you, Tabitha. I apologize for not introducing myself.
Thank you. My question for these near-term major projects is, can you define near-term? Like, what's the time horizon for these projects?
So we're currently in construction for the sedimentation tank. So that's essentially recoding an existing tanks that are there. Our new outfall pipeline, we're 90% in design for that. So we anticipate hopefully to start construction on that in hopefully by next year. It just depends on other priorities and projects. The secondary treatment upgrade is currently in design. So we anticipate that we'll start construction on that and be completed by that. I think it's starting at the 26th, Lisa. You're good at better at dates than I am. And then we're currently in design on the advanced water purification system as well. Headworks facility and the lab operations building, those are farther out. So we haven't even started design on that.
So if it's in design, how many years does it take to design?
Usually about a year to design, and then we have to go out for construction. So the secondary treatment upgrade is going to take, I think, 4 years for construction because we have to stage it. The outfall pipeline it's a couple seasons because we have to navigate the Ridgeway rail that is out there because it's near the Baylands. And sedimentation tank I think it's taking about 2 years to complete.
Got it. So it sounds like a lot of these are gonna start and finish in the next 5 years or so.
Correct. In the next 10 years, we anticipate to do all of these. That's our goal. Granted, projects do slip, but.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from commissioners, or should we put the recommended motion slide up? All right, I always ask for a motion because chairs are not supposed to initiate the motion if possible.
Motion to approve.
All right, we have a motion from Commissioner Metz.
I'll second.
Commissioner Johnson seconds. All right, sorry, and the motion to approve the recommendation of staff. I guess we should just be clear.
Yes, motion to approve the recommendation of staff.
All right. Commissioner Johnston.
Yeah, I vote yes.
Vice Chair Siegel.
Yes.
Commissioner Metz.
Yes.
And I approve as well. So that's wastewater. All right. Let's move on to the gas utility financial plan. And we will start by seeing if there are any members of the public who wish to address the UAC about the gas utility financial plan.
If anyone would like to speak about this item, please raise your hand. There are no hands raised.
All right. I assume there's a staff presentation. I see Mr. Keniston.
Yes, Eric Keniston, our rates manager, will be
There is.
talking about.
Eric Keniston, Senior Resource Planner.
There you go.
All right, go ahead. Thank you.
All right, let me share my screen. And there we go. Hopefully it's appearing. Right. So tonight we're bringing to you the gas financial plan proposed rate changes for FY 2023. I should note that tonight what we're bringing to you the 4% rate increase overall. It's a 6% distribution rate increase, but a 4% overall rate increase. This is not, there's no change from what we presented to you in the preliminary financial plans back in December. So much of this, it would be a rehash. I'll skip ahead, I think, to the main screen. What we have proposed is a 4% for FY 2023 and then 4% rate increases for the years thereafter. The projected operating reserves are right around the target guidelines. In this proposal, we have, this is a bill impact. I think something that has been, that you've been looking at and wondering is, how does this, when we're talking about a distribution rate increase and a commodity rate increase, how does this factor? I would say right now, gas commodity prices, as has been mentioned earlier, have been quite high, and our future projections actually have them coming down a bit. So the comparison, if we're saying the 4% rate increase, it's about a 4% rate increase, might even be a little bit lower if gas market prices continue to increase. So here you can see that for a median residential customer, it's about 3 to 4%. For commercial customers, about 3 to 4%. And these were based upon gas prices just as of October, November, which have been some of our highest to date. All that said, these are bill comparisons against PG&E. We're still, for the most part, quite a bit lower, and our winter gas prices are quite a bit lower than PG&E. Summer prices are in some cases higher, but again, this is due to the fact that we have a fixed charge for gas customers, whereas PG&E does not. So for small users, it would tend to impact and flip that over for them. This is just another representation. If you look at it on a fiscal year basis for FY21, we were 14% below PG&E overall for residential customers. And that will actually, I don't know if you want me to go into very much more detail on the gas, but that would actually cap and summarize most of what I have for tonight. And I would bring up, so we're bringing to you tonight the gas financial plan, transfers of $3 million from the operations reserve to the CIP reserve, $2.7 million from the rate stabilization, what remains in the rate stabilization reserve into operations reserve, and then adopting resolution for a 6% distribution rate increase, effectively a 4% overall rate increase to the gas utility rates. So with that, that ends my presentation on gas, and I look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you. Vice Chair Siegel.
Thanks. I have sort of a tangential question from the packet, which is, it says we went to this every other year CIP expenditures, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in the packet, it says the plan includes approximately 7 to 9 million every other year for main replacement construction instead of 5 to 6 million annually. And I thought the idea was we were sort of doing bigger projects every other year to lower the cost, and the rate isn't really that much higher. And I'm just curious about that.
So are you referring to the fact that let me, so back to
It's,
your,
I'm sorry, it's page 7, if that's helpful, page 157 of the packet.
okay. Let's see. I have the actual financial plan up, so let me move to page 157.
I mean, it just, I don't even know how much it affects the plan. It's just sort of this idea that I thought we were going to the every other year approach, but spending more because we thought that that would give us savings. And it doesn't, it looks like we're going to every other year, but not really upping the budget. Instead of doubling, it's only about 50% more. And I was just sort of curious about that.
Well, it's not really doubling. The main replacement project itself is only one portion of overall CIP. So yes, we're increasing the amount of CIP, but there's a lot of one big main replacement project, but there's a lot of other projects included in the mix. So you have customer replacement, you have
Can I jump in, Eric?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, Commissioner Siegel, you're correct. I think we are trying to budget every other year for CIP. Oh, actually, we're trying to construct every other year for CIP projects, but we are trying to budget every year to smooth out the rates. So we're not budgeting, increasing rates one year for 10 million and the next year for $0. So we're trying to do a 5 million flat line budgeting, if that makes sense. So one year we'll raise 5 million every year in rates, but then we'll construct every other year the $10 million projects.
Right, I guess that's okay. So, and maybe it's just because it's only part of it, but it includes 7 to 9 million every other year for main replacement construction instead of 5 to 6 million annually. But are we budgeting 5 or 6 million annually? So it should be 10 to 12 every other year. I guess that's my bottom line question. Or is it just only one portion? And so you can't look at it that way.
Yeah, I think like Eric said, 7 to 9 represents the main CIP replacement project, but there's other smaller CIP projects that brings it up to the $9 to $12 million total.
Right.
So Vice Chair Siegel, so one of the other projects that Eric was thinking about is that we're still doing inspections on our gas through sewer pipes, which is $1 million that we're still paying on that. We're looking at doing that. So I think the thing is that 5 and 6 is an annual cost of $1 million. That 5 and 6 gets added to the 7 and 9 every year. So because there's other projects other than just construction costs. That helps.
I think, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, but the every other year model wasn't able to be implemented over the last couple of years because of COVID and the disruptions that happened in that preferred construction schedule. Is that true?
I don't believe that's true. I think we have been sort of doing the planning and then construction of the main every other year has been what's generally been planned. So if you look 21, we had a large expenditure. We have another one planned for FY23. 22 was a year where we didn't necessarily have a new budgeted project. Now we might, for instance, due to project slip, if we budget in 1 year, but we can't actually complete it, it gets done. It might be done in the following year, but we're not per se, it's not a new budget item. The dollars for that have been allocated, set aside, reappropriated for purposes of that project. And that's this viewpoint here. If you look at the orange bar, looks at new budget funding for what we're looking at, saying, new projects exist, main replacement projects as they are freshly budgeted, not projects which we have previously budgeted but might have slipped due to timing issues. If I didn't just hopefully confuse the issue more, but.
Vice Chair, did you have additional follow-up questions, or you?
No, I mean, I think I get bottom line is that we're putting in the reserves about 5 to 6 million a year, and we're spending it every other year, and it may or may not exactly line up, but over a couple of years, it will, is how I take that. Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Metz?
Yeah, I had one question. I guess it's really a comment. With this plan going out, 6 years to 2027, in addition to the, housing mandates that we talked about before, it seems like the city has its SCAP plan, which a big ingredient, which is electrification. And so, baking into this, thinking about what that means for the gas utility, I think it's not reflected in here, but seems like these two plans are kind of colliding and we need to reconcile them. So, I know it's not in there now, but I would urge that we start thinking about that.
It is definitely something that we are, planning and contemplating for, how the long-term construction path for the gas system will run. So that is something that we're working and trying to factor into future forecasts as that comes along.
Is that the kind of thing that you sort of wait to incorporate into the planning until council has sort of adopted a particular plan?
I think once we can develop a strategy and a template for how how we're going to either start downsizing mains, downsizing neighborhoods, or that sort of path and plan, it's difficult to just throw it into the financial plan as a guesstimate. Right now, I'd say we're seeing a long run decrease in gas usage, and we know that people are using less. The gas system is sort of shrinking on its own, but at a very slow pace. And it's difficult without knowing, let's say when is it going to start dramatically dropping off? When are we going to start be able to disconnect neighborhoods, say, or if that's a possible plan? How we would go about incorporating that into the financial plan, we need a little bit more concrete set to throw that into the mix.
Yeah, I think Chair Fosell has raised a really important point, maybe to sort of flip around what I said, which is, what inputs do you need to be able to, from the city council, to be able to plan this out, to incorporate those kinds of things in the plan? Because I understand you can't just be going off on your own, changing stuff. So maybe that would be helpful, where we could have some influence on city council to get you inputs that you need.
So I think, I believe we're actually working on some of those to the existing SCAP plans, developing some strategies and timelines and proposals for how things are going to move forward, both on an electrification side, but as well as a degasification over the long run type side. So hopefully this data will be coming to us soon.
Yeah, if I could just add to Eric's, I think that's the key, is that, I think as we move forward with this, as we work with council to understand where the direction and what our goals that we're going to set. Because one of the other areas is that we've been thinking about in some of these areas where you read here, where there's PVC mains, is that's where we probably would want to look at electrifying. So that way there, we don't have to replace that gas main in there, and we can electrify that block or those streets in those areas to save these dollars that we would typically have to upgrade because these PVC pipes are 50+ years out there. So I think that as we have more conversations with council, as well as we have a workshop that will be coming up with council to discuss the SCAP, I think it'll be a little clearer for us as we move forward in the future years on what we do with our gas system as a whole.
Yeah, may I jump in? Dean, this is Sylvia Santos, Water Gas Wastewater Engineering Manager. Dean's correct. Maybe we can strategize how to pick an area or block to do electrification, but it's a pretty complicated process. because these PVC mains are scattered, and we are targeting replacing them because the glue joints are potential, like has high potential for failure during Earth's movement. However, we can pick a block to, in the beginning, it will be easier to pick a block here or there to abandon the PVC. But we have to look at whether this block has the transformer capacity to allow the electrification to happen. But over time, we can't just keep dropping these PVC mains all over the town, because we have to worry about whether there's feeder lines. We can continue to distribute gas. So there's other things we have to consider. So as long as we have to maintain the gas system, we have to make sure we have a reliable system. But that's something we can work it out, but it's pretty complicated. We need to look at the transformer capacity and where these PVC pipes are and strategize how we can continue to distribute from this area to that area. But that's something definitely we can look into.
Let's see, I just have a couple of quick questions. One is looking again at the transfers from reserve to reserve in this case. 2.766 million from the rate stabilization to reserve to the operations reserve. I assume that is to stabilize rates, like it's sitting there in the rate stabilization reserve, and we're trying to keep from doing a huge rate increase.
Correct.
And that's what that transfer is about?
Yes.
And then from the operations reserve to the CIP reserve, is that because this is an off year? And so it's transferring to the CIP reserve where it will sit until a capital improvement project is ready to go, and then it'll get transferred back to operations to build something? Okay.
Yeah. So, and hypothetically next year, much of that money would be transferred back to the operations reserve to cover CIP projects.
Right. So we can look forward to that next year, that it'll be coming back out. Okay. I think I'm starting to understand the flow from reserve to reserve. My other question is just, what is with the pass-through commodity charge on gas? Is there a time delay? Like, how does that work? From the day that I read in the newspaper that natural gas prices spiked for some reason or other, say because of a big conflict. How long does it take before I see that reflected on my utilities bill?
So we purchase gas. It's based on the bid week, the PG&E bid week price as published, and we get that monthly. It's published on the first day of the month in a publication for the gas industry. And so that's when our prices are set. That's when we get indication of what the price is going to be for the month. And then, so first day, that's when we find it. And that's when I go in and I enter that into the system for the existing month. So today I just, for instance, or as of yesterday, I went in and did the gas rate changes for March 1st. So that's when we get those changes, but it doesn't fluctuate daily. There may be some transactions that happen at a back end level at our suppliers for the daily market prices, but for us, it's mainly based upon the bid week price is what we pass through.
So we're reflecting the price of the market price of gas for the month that you're using it. And so by the time you see your bill, which is a little, few weeks later, looking back at your usage should be charged at the market price for that month.
So it's pretty immediate. In other words, it's about as timely as it could be.
Yes.
And does the utility purchase all of its natural gas at market rates, or do we have forward contracts?
We purchase everything
that could turn
at
out to be favorable or disfavorable in the rearview mirror?
We purchase everything at market rates, and we purchase what we expect to use for the month at that beginning of the month price. And then we do some truing up in the middle of the month on the daily market, but so sometimes we buy a little, sometimes we sell a little. It kind of evens out by the end usually. And so the price that we pass through to the customer is that first of the month price.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. That's it for me. Councilmember Cormack.
Thank you so much, Chair Forcell. And I just wanted to thank Commissioner Metz for bringing up the SCAP. So some of the comments you heard from the gas utility staff today are the corollary to Mr. Marshall's statements to the UAC last month, which is not only are we potentially not yet prepared, I'm trying to figure out how to say this politely, to accommodate everyone being electric, we also have to think very carefully about how we maintain a safe gas utility for every customer until the end, and work that through. So it's a two-part problem. One of the things we're doing on the SCAP is starting to work in teams, and there are 4 teams. One team is focused on technology, one team is focused on financing, one team is focused on community engagement, and then the one that I think might be of particular interest to the UAC is currently called community scaling, which makes no sense to me. I'm calling it building capacity in my mind. And it has 2 parts, and one part of this is building the capacity on the electric side. And then the other part is how do we build capacity to actually install all of the, electric appliances, et cetera, whatever. So these teams are starting work. It's going to be hopefully just a few months of work for each of them. And there may be an opportunity for a member of the UAC to participate. Mayor Burt is now the chair of the SCAP. And so we'll see how that progresses. But I think that would be the area that, this commission might be able to continue to help over time. One of the questions I asked when we first established the ad hoc was that the right format? And it was deemed that way by the council. But the next step is a logical question, right? Where will this work continue? Will it always be an ad hoc of the council? Will it be its own commission, the way I had suggested when we did the ad hoc on boards and commissions? Is there another format? So I think we're at the beginning of what I always call the messy middle. But I think the more conversations we have about this, I know the more I and other members of the SCAP are learning about the complexities of our utility business. And the work that we all have to do together. So really appreciate you bringing that up. And again, we have to think about this as carefully as we're thinking about expanding the electric side.
Thank you, Councilmember Cormack. If there's no further discussion, I'm not seeing any hands. The recommendation slide is already up. Do we have a motion?
I move to accept the resolution as recommended by the staff.
I'll second.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Johnston,
I vote yes.
Vice Chair Siegel,
Yes.
Commissioner Metz.
Yes.
All right, and I approve as well. So the UAC recommends adopting that resolution. And then we can turn to item number 9 of 9 of our new business tonight. The financial plan for the electric utility. And let's go ahead and see if there are any members of the public wishing to address the UAC on the electric financial plan.
If anyone from the public would like to speak on the electric item, please raise your hand. No hands are raised.
All right. Mr. Keniston, is it you still for staff or? All
Still
right,
up. So,
go ahead.
all right, so let me share screen again. The electric. So tonight we're bringing to the electric, and unlike the gas, there's a slight variation in what we are bringing to you tonight. If you remember back in December, we were suggesting possibility of an 8% rate increase. After looking at it again, And we took another stab at, we had a higher set of rate increases and then dropping off. We said, let's instead take a look at seeing if we could do a more level rate increase over time. So what we are bringing for you tonight is a 5% rate increase with projected 5% rate increases going forward. That said, there's going to be a lot of reserve transfer requests in here. One of the things that we will need to do with this 5% proposal is to essentially drain most of the hydro stabilization reserve to help offset the much higher electric prices that we're seeing due to the drought. We just don't have the hydro supply out there like we would like to have. One of the things that also was also mentioned earlier tonight is that we have a motion from the council to activate the hydro rate adjuster. That has not been activated since we put it into play, several years ago now. But that will be adding about 1.3 cents per kilowatt hour starting in April if it's approved. At this point in time, my guess is that hydro conditions will not get much better going into the next fiscal year. And if they do not get better, and since we'll have used most of the reserve for hydro, chances are that rate may stay in effect for FY23 as well. Again, I said, future rate increases of 5% for 24 and beyond. However, one additional change that we're going to make, we've been discussing this in the 11th hour, is again, getting back to SCAP and the future needs for electrification. One of the things that we're looking at doing is possibly adding about $150 million at some point, starting about 2025, going for 10 years, spending that much money over that much time. This would be something that we would look at bond financing, for instance. So we've gone out and looked to see what the impact would be for the annual payments on a bonds of about, say, $50 million every 3 years. And starting in 2025, it'd be call it about an extra $3 million a year. So that doesn't affect the rate increase that we're proposing for FY23. But starting in 24, 25, we might, instead of 5%, we might be looking at something along the lines of 6%. Again, however, though, what we're looking to bring you tonight and what we're looking for approval for is the prompt FY23 increase of 5%. So let me move on to, again, here's the new proposal that we're bringing for you. It's a 5% levelized going forward. As I said, though, we're looking at now taking that capital investment starting in about 25 will go up by quite a bit to start funding for electrification measures, possibly 24, 25. But we'll be bringing in, the thought right now is that we'll be doing bond financing to help offset those costs. The short-term effect on the electric supply operating reserve, since we're going to be taking out a lot of the money from the hydro stabilization reserve, there'll be a bump up in the prompt in FY23 as we bring in this money, but we'll rapidly be blowing through that very quickly in both the supply as well as the distribution reserve. There'll be some fluctuations, but overall, the goal is to still keep the operations reserve right near the end, right near target level by the time we finish each financial plan within a 5-year time frame. That's generally how I like to run things. One of the things that was brought up the last time is how do we, the effect of draining reserves or taking away the hydro stabilization reserve and then moving it into operations reserve. How does this meet our risk needs? As you can see here, the red line is our risk assessment level. We're still going to be doing okay for our reserves through 23 and 24 that we see. This is also where there's still continuing questions as to how electric usage is going to be. We've seen very low electric usage with COVID, but we're hoping for recovery coming into calendar year 23-ish. Maybe things will get better sooner. We can cross our fingers and hope, but this is what we're looking at right now. This was the earlier proposal that we had, which was an 8%, 7%, 6%, but then dropping off in latter years. And I think we've moved away from this proposal and are looking at something else. Looking at the 5% proposal, we feel is a lot more meat. So one other thing that let me go back here to the beginning slide. Electric Special Projects Reserve, something that might have fallen off the radar is that the Special Project Reserve had a original limited time frame. If projects were not all declared for that pot of money by the end of FY 2022, that the money would then revert to the operations reserve. What we're bringing to you as part of this proposal tonight is to not default that money to the operations reserve, but keep the special projects reserve active at least through FY 2027. For those of you who might not know, the special projects reserve we're using for large one-time projects. So right now, the smart grid project is being paid for using the special projects reserve funds. One of the other things we were looking at doing with the ESP reserve was second transmission line. That's been taking a little bit longer to plan, but it's still something that we in the future might be looking at. So we'd like to keep that pot of money available to use for such projects. Also, if in the long term, that could be used for electrification measures if we so needed. So one of the recommendations we're bringing forward tonight is to keep that set of money set aside in the special projects reserve and not have it sunset at the end of this fiscal year as it otherwise would. So with that, I think that ends my presentation on electric. Let me just actually describe to you, let's of course go through the estimated bill changes. 5% rate increase. What does that mean? It's 5% across the board for all customers. So very easy for a residential customer. Again, it's based on usage, but about next, about $3 for a median customer. But the way that it's structured is that it's 5% for all categories of usage across the board. Our bill comparisons. Versus PG&E, what they're offering I think we're almost around 40% plus for residential rates lower. Commercial, anywhere, I think between 5 to 15% lower for PG&E. Santa Clara rates are still a bit lower than ours. They're catching up to us on some residential, but for small commercial customers, we're actually slightly lower for like our E2 segment versus their larger commercial customers, they're slightly lower than us. So that gives you a view of just how we compare against other agencies. And with that, this is that would end my presentation. I have a set of recommendation slides because there are two. Most of it deals with a whole series of transfers, requesting a transfer of, like I said, 15 million from the hydro stabilization to the supply operations reserve to help keep operations reserve flush. We're also requesting a $5 million transfer from the special projects reserve in the short term to help the operations reserve. Again, we can't just freely transfer money between reserves, even though they're part of the same fund. We have to go through and make a formal request in terms of resolution. What we would do, though, with the special projects reserve specifically is there is a plan to start repaying that. So starting in like 24, 25, fiscal year 24, 25, we would start repaying those monies back. As was mentioned earlier, we have an allocation of funds for the rec revenues to be spent for local decarbonization programs. That'll be held aside. We have a special reserve for that to make sure that it is only spent for decarb programs. And here also the reserve management practices clarifying the changes to the ESP reserve. And then the next slide deals with all of the changes to rates. And with that, that ends my presentation tonight on electric, and I look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Kinnison. Commissioner Johnston.
So first of all, I want to thank you for taking the effort to spread the cost increases out. I mean, we talked about that, and it's one of the things that I was anxious to see you to take a look at. So, and I think this is a good solution, even though I recognize it's going to pull the reserves kind of right down to the minimum level. But I think that it's worth it in this case, particularly given that we're going to have kind of larger than expected increase in the water area. So it's nice to be able to level this out. I think from what you said, I think I know the answer to my question here, but I'm assuming that the capital improvements program that you're basically assuming for the next couple of fiscal years was based on what I'll call option discussed at our February 2 meeting, which is that there was no overall plan for grid modernization to meet the SCAP. That this is kind of making improvements to the electric system as you go, not specifically a grid improvement to match SCAP. Am I right about that?
Correct. That was not factored into this plan.
Right.
Right. So yeah.
And if that's the case, as I assumed it was, I think it's really important to, as you talked about, to begin thinking very carefully about what the costs are going to be to modernize the grid to meet the SCAP goals, and to start the planning now for how that's going to be paid for. And I really appreciate the fact that it sounds like you're already thinking about this. So thank you for that.
Any other commissioner questions? Commissioner Metz, was that a hand up?
Nope.
Vice Chair Siegel, did you have any questions? All right, I have a couple, many of the ones that I jotted down beforehand, you already covered in your presentation. Thank you very much. Let's see, a couple of small things, basically. In the proposal, you mentioned the 5% involves changes to and activation of the hydro rate adjuster. What are the changes to the hydro rate adjuster?
So the changes to the hydro rate adjuster, the way that the original hydro rate adjuster was set up is that we would do the evaluation in May for a fiscal year start in July. And it also required us to, for the reserves to already be drawn down when we made the determination. Part of the recommendation that we're bringing to council in later this month is modifications to that plan such that if we know that we're going to be withdrawing this money, reserves are going to be low, we're going to be within the target zone that we would otherwise activate it, that if staff has enough knowledge that this is going to be the case, that would be enough for us to recommend actually activating that rate. Being as right now the hydro situation is, I'm trying to think if I have the slide out here. I'm not quite sure. That the existing hydro situation is so low that we basically are in a situation to where activating the 1.3 cent adder would be done if this was July, and and we'd already exhausted all the reserves and everything else. So part of that change is that we're activating that if we activate the hydro rate adjuster, if it's approved, that'll bring in at about an extra $2.5 to $3 million this fiscal year. And then long-term next year, if it remains active at the highest rate, there'll be about $10 million. If somehow hydro conditions get better but are still poor, such that we keep it active at the 0.65 cents range, then it'd bring in about $5 million a year additional. If we didn't have that going on and we had still continued to have the high purchase costs, we would need to do a higher general rate increase. The benefit about the hydro rate adjuster, of course, is that once things get better in the hydro market, or we can turn it off fairly quickly. So that's the benefit of the HRA.
I remember it having that property. So the changes are basically just giving staff more flexibility to bring it forward on an accelerated timeline when you have the information that you need.
Yeah.
Got it. And then it just occurred to me as you were talking, does local solar, various commercial and residential rooftop installations particularly affect load growth? Or, adversely affect load growth in the city?
I would say it's probably not adversely. I mean, it definitely, I wouldn't say it's adverse, but yeah.
Do you factor it in to your projections and planning, and how big of an impact does it have?
I would say it doesn't have a tremendous effect on it. I would say most of what we're seeing right now, it's in that general 1% to 1%, 1.5% annual decline. That's about what it factors into as people keep adding solar to their systems. The bigger impact right now, I would say, is efficiencies. People are continuing to find better lighting, better equipment to run, and that is, I'd say, accelerating our path of general load decline more than solar would be. But of course, right now, COVID, obviously, with several businesses and industries just not at the full scale activation as they used to be. That's what we're seeing the majority of our hopefully temporary load decline.
Yeah, got it. And then my final question is, if you have this information at your fingertips, great. Otherwise, I think it might be a request for a follow-up email. I'm just curious what districts have been undergrounded in the last year and which ones are projected or planned for undergrounding, and which substations are being upgraded. Those were both called out as projects in the report.
This is not something I know offhand. I'm not sure if we have staff on who can speak to that, so I might have to follow up in an email afterwards. So,
Yeah, Chair Frisell, I couldn't tell you which underground is being planned for this year, so we'll have to get back to you. We'll send out an email out to the whole commission on those two questions.
Were there any undergrounding districts completed in the last couple of years?
There was, and it's the one that's off of, sorry, it's fairly close by. It's going in that direction.
Embarcadero?
No, it's off of, is it Channing? I apologize.
All good. I put you on the spot. I'm just curious if you can send that out afterwards.
Yeah, we can do that because it also went around the block. It's one of the one-way streets going that direction, then goes around, then comes back up this way. So, but it was in 4 blocks that we undergrounded in that area. So I'll need to get that back to you.
Got it. All right, Councilmember Cormack,
Thanks, Chair Forcell. Hello, Mr. Keniston. It's nice to see you again, even in a little Hollywood Square version. Who decides, I confess I don't know, I'm looking at number 4, how we spend our cap and trade program funds?
So historically in the electric side, we've spent cap and trade funds for renewable resources. So that's how we allocate it, that it's all been used for bucket 1 renewables in state.
Okay.
So we can choose to, though, say that we are holding some of that money aside to use for programs. That's program services, or RMD staff. We can make that choice. What we don't spend, what we hold aside in reserves, the only stipulation on that is that we have 10 years to spend those funds on appropriate programs. So.
Okay, so staff can decide within a range of approved uses.
Yes, council, we have approved, several years ago, we had a list of approved activities that we could use cap and trade funds for. And in electric, as I said, renewables was something that was immediately available and something that we could do. And to date, that's what we spent. Everything that we've gotten in the way of allowance money we've been able to use that to offset renewables expenses.
It's a pretty big allowance.
Yeah.
I see Mr. Abendschein has joined us. Did you want to share some more thoughts? Because you can probably guess where I'm going.
Well, I'll wait until you get there, and I'm happy to answer any questions when you get there. The only thing I was going to add is that it's specifically delegated to the city manager.
Okay, perfect. That's really what I was looking at. Okay, wonderful. That answers my question for the time being. And then if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Keniston, the next slide, I think I had a question on one of these other items. Yes. So 8 and 9 have to do with people who have solar now, right?
Correct.
Okay, and so we see a lot in the news about NEM, and I read through this, but if you were going to explain this to someone who has solar today here in Palo Alto and is concerned, how would you explain the changes that are proposed in 8 and 9?
So the changes to 8 and 9 reflect the avoided cost for electricity. And it's the same methodology that we've used for years with these. So there's really no change at all to the methodology used to calculate either one of these rates. Much as what's been, I think you're talking in the news, is like the NEM 3.0, some of the discussions that have been going on with PG&E. That really doesn't affect us, I would say. Part of the, and maybe I can just leave it at that, and if you have any other questions, but I think 8 and 9, it's really no change to methodology that we've utilized for several years. So.
Okay, so there are minor changes to the way we've been doing it. And just again, at sort of a high level, are we either subsidizing or penalizing people who have solar, or is it a super neutral calculation?
For the compensation rate for those under the NEM 2 program, there's two tranches of NEM customers. The NEM 1 program was the original, and then the NEM 2. For NEM 1 customers, they are still grandfathered under a provision to where solar energy that they use, any energy that they generate, up to, to net out everything, we compensate them at the full retail rate.
Okay.
There is some subsidization that does occur under the NEM 1 program. Under the NEM 2 program, however, no, there's no subsidies. It's a simple, It's actually very nice separate metering. What you use, we charge at full retail. What you generate, you only get at the compensation rate. So no subsidies occur.
Okay, that's super helpful. Thank you.
And actually following up on that question, understood it's the same methodology. What does it indicate as the price per kilowatt hour for the electricity compensation rate? I remember when a long time ago, it was like 8.5 cents a kilowatt hour, but that was a few years back. I'm curious what it is now.
Yes, let's see, I think it's about, the compensation rate, I think it's going to be about 10 cents, 9 to 10 cents. So, yeah. I could look it up. I'm trying to find it in the report quickly.
Packet page 201.
M2 is 10.45.
All right. Thank you. I have been pointed to it in the report. And what's the difference between the export electricity compensation and the net surplus electricity compensation rate?
One is used for NEM1 customers and the other one's used for NEM2 customers. So.
Right. No. I'm just, which one is NEM1 and which one is NEM2 and why do they have different names?
So let me find that. Even I must admit, sometimes even I get mixed up as to which one should go to which. So let me find that on the report.
It's page 13 in the report.
You know, it doesn't matter. I thought there were like 2 forks of NEM2.
No.
So just hearing that one of these is NEM1, fair enough.
Yeah.
But then if NEM1, I see, it just need to be updated to reflect the current retail rates.
Yes, exactly. It's well, no, it's not the reflective of the current retail rates. It's the avoided cost. One is a forward looking and one's there's slightly different ways that they look at avoided cost. For NEM1 customers who choose to get compensated for the electricity that they generate in excess.
Got it.
That's the rate that they get for, and it's the.
That's number 9 then. Number 9 is NEM1 and number 8 is NEM2. Yep.
Correct, yes.
That all makes sense. Sorry to belabor that. I should have read the report more closely. I appreciate you bearing with me. All right, is there any other discussion? It's an impressive recommendation needing 2 pages, including some bullets.
And I'm sorry about that. I contemplated putting it all on one slide, but it was going to be microtype, so.
Yeah, no, this is about as small of a font as I personally can manage, so I appreciate that. Do we have a motion?
I'll move that we accept the staff's recommendations, the 10 numbered points shown on the slide.
All right, do we have a second?
I'll second. Oh.
All right, and with that, Commissioner Johnston,
Yes, aye.
Vice Chair Siegel,
Approve.
Commissioner Metz,
Yes.
and I approve as well. Thank you very much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Preston. And we're on the home stretch of our agenda. Are there any commissioner comments and reports from meetings or events? It's been a quiet week, perhaps, quiet month. Very good. Then let's go straight to future topics for upcoming meetings. Are there any suggestions from commissioners for future topics? Commissioner Johnston.
Yeah, I would hope that we're going to get a follow-up presentation on the kind of the grid modernization program that we started to talk about in February, and we've touched on a little bit tonight. But I think it's important that we continue to focus on that. And it sounds like the electric utility is doing a lot of thinking about it, and it'd be nice to have a discussion. So I'd put that on the agenda.
Yeah, I agree. That was a really great presentation last month. And so keeping the conversation going would be much appreciated. Tabitha Boatwright.
Yes, commissioners, I just wanted to make a note that due to the ordinance accepted by the city council recently, adjusting all of the terms for all of the board and commissions, so they're all elected at the same time of year to make it easier on council. Our commissioners' terms have been changed from May 31st to March 31st. Therefore, it would be suggested that next month we actually elect the chair and vice chair and any ad hoc committees that the UAC has in order to get on a regular schedule.
All right. Thanks for that reminder. Are there any other suggested topics? If not, then I think we are done for tonight. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
I'll second.
All right, thank you both. Hey, good job, everybody. We managed a hybrid meeting. This is kind of exciting. So thanks, everyone. Thanks, everybody who beamed in. Thanks for staff who was here. We will see you all next month.
Right.
All right. Oh, there's finally a gavel. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
There we go.